immediately go live.
Yeah. All right, and we're live. What I'll do, let me just try and find the link again.
Now we need resolve video. We don't have resolve video.
No, but the live stream does. It's okay.
I got
You
you.
guys
That
don't
makes
get to see
sense.
me,
I
yeah,
see
unless
it
you're
now.
watching the live stream. um, we're technically supposed to be live in 3 minutes or something like that, but we're going live now, so we can redo the link because of
Fun.
technical issues. Here it is. There we go.
Resolve. Yeah, I can see it. It's good.
Perfect. Now we can. If anybody's in the chat, I'm about to retweet the link here because we had an OBS crash and then
something was fun.
Yeah. All
Open source. Guys, could you talk about how to use pink noise to find peaks and dips? I mean, that's kind of like you gotta have an ear for that. That's pretty hard. That's an interesting question, though. I don't know if any of us have tried. I haven't tried that in a long time, but I know Tile used to do that. We already have a question, and that was the question.
Pink noise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just realized I muted myself as I'm answering questions.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's nice.
It's even better.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like things have gotten back to normal. Stream health is good. All right. So this is, I guess we might as well start. So this is episode 6, I think, of Headphone Show, and we have Metal571, of course, and Flux, who is the international man of mystery, or at least the headphone-related man of mystery.
Jeez, yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, so Flux is somebody who often. Let's say he's running loaner tours for a certain group of reviewers. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so way back before loaner tours happened, I was doing local meets, at least like audio related. I was doing local meets in my home state of Ohio, and I would mostly do it at my local university. And I would also go to other smaller meets in Ohio as well. Pretty sure I made it to like multiple can jams pre 2015. So like most of the smaller ones compared to the ones that like were just either recently canceled or recently attended. So yeah, I've been kind of around since probably about 2012. But I've only recently got more involved since about, I would say, 2016 in terms of doing mods in the community or, giving my thoughts and opinions on various corners of the internet, like at home, as in what I do in my day job. So I spend a little bit of time at a grocery store helping out my dad. I pick up some shifts on the side at a local pizza place, and then my primary job is being a civil engineer, pretty close to my parents' house actually. But I ended up moving out a couple years ago, and that's also kind of when my reviewing took off because I had more free time. So yeah, that's pretty much a nice, concise wrap up of me. I'm sure as we'll go out on throughout the show, you'll find out more about me. But I also got multiple requests to do this appearance with my helmet on. And, I'll refrain. I think it's a little bit more professional to be here present.
And I appreciate that. Thank you for. Yeah. So I mean, with that, I mean, you're somebody who's had the experience of just about you've gotten a chance to experience just about every high-end headphone that there is, both through going to can jams and things like that, and also just because I mean you have a lot of them, like the LCD4 and the SysFar and everything. Do you plan on conducting sort of the full scale written review style thing, or maybe video reviews in the future? Is this something that we could look forward to for, let's say, Flux reviews?
Yeah. So, oh,
Not to put you on the
I
spot or
would,
anything. You don't need to
yeah,
commit to
I
anything
would
now.
be, I would be more. I think I would be more inclined to do a written review as opposed to a video review. And it's only because I feel like I could work on a written review over the course of time. I
Hmm.
don't necessarily have the free time to conduct a video review in an ideal environment right now. And I wouldn't expect me at my next place or a future house or whatever. I wouldn't expect to be able to conduct video reviews and have, say, a 20 to 30-minute uninterrupted take, which is kind of, I don't know, to me it feels kind of weird because you would think that if I were to be in my own place with no interruptions, that would mean that I would I would have that ability, but I tend to do a bunch of things at once, or rather hinder myself by doing more than one thing at once.
Hmm.
So, a lot of the times when I'm listening to music, I am trying to concentrate on the music, and in a sense, I get to review a headphone, but it's not like just in the one environment that is like gaming, or it's not in the one environment that is like coming home from work and like throwing on a pair of headphones and then just like sitting back and relaxing. I don't particularly just do that one thing at home. And for me, as just for so long a random person that contributes on Discord, I haven't felt the need to like put my opinions out there. I can just talk to my friends or talk to those who are on Discord and get like bounce opinions off each other in order for me to kind of really solidify my opinion.
Hmm.
So I guess the short version is I would entertain written reviews. How frequent those would be and what those products would be, um, I'm not sure at this point. Obviously, I mean, on my wall, I do have a few options that I could start with, but I don't know that I would entertain the idea of doing every product release that comes out, just
Right.
because my current free time is. I'd like to say it's like down to nothing, but I feel like I have enough free time to like
Yep. Yeah.
compose one written review over the course of each week.
Hmm.
But
It's funny, like a lot of the comments that I get on videos of where I've reviewed something that's like a really high end thing, I inevitably get questions from people wanting to know how it compares to another high end thing that like I've never had a chance to hear before. So it's like you would have the luxury of, well, first of all, having heard a lot of them at the Can Jams, but also personally owning some of them, or
right,
through some of the loaner tours that you're doing. So like
right.
having that breadth of experience and knowledge about the way that all these different things sound, I think it is actually something that a lot of people tend to value. But just on the subject of the format for video reviews, I mean, what you just described, I imagine, is also Metal571's format of just sitting down and, for a good, however long it takes to do the one take,
And
getting
causing
everything.
people to fall asleep. Yeah.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, it's definitely a different style, and I mean, I don't think that it, like, one doesn't necessarily take more time than the other, or maybe it does, but like it doesn't mean that it has to, because there's inevitably going to be times where you do that one take and then something happens that interrupts it, and then you're like, oh, I got to start
Right.
again.
Which
um,
I could see doing like cuts for the sake of
yeah.
editing and for the sake of making it clean. But yeah, I don't know um in what capacity I would want to do that in.
Hmm.
I wouldn't see a career in it, but it would be something that I could do just for fun.
Yeah.
And of course, if there's anybody that knows about trying to do it for fun and then it feeling like torture. I feel like
Oh.
I feel like I'm talking to my mentor from about 6 years ago.
Oh, you've way surpassed me on that. But
Oh.
mainly because I haven't heard as many DAGs and amps. That's why, because I don't have like I don't have
Yeah,
the capacity to own all those things.
right. And
So
I mean, also it does feel weird at this point to kind of temporarily be expanding just a little bit just for the sake of hearing X on Y or hearing this and this when it is affected by this characteristic or that characteristic. So, like for me personally, although as far as high end DACs, like I've had the Yggdrasil the longest, um, I don't know that it's really my favorite.
Mm.
Um, and obviously the power requirements of it constantly needing to be on, that's a huge
yeah, that's so weird.
that's a huge problem for most people and even me. But I felt like recently the types of items that I have been interested in are more the what I'll call the pro DAX or the DAX by various manufacturers that are used for mixing, for the mastering process, in the creation of records. I'm more interested in that at the moment. So there are a few that are coming in, and hopefully there are a few more on the way. Just gotta wait for about a month, and then they should be all here. But in the short term, I'll be having 3 other DACs that will be kind of shooting off against my reference of the Yggdrasil. Um, and a lot of that is due to the fact that I just recently sold the Chord Dave,
Right.
and then the M scaler will be out of the way shortly. But at the moment, um, it's the M scaler is kind of an interface for the rest of things. And I guess if I'm talking about my chain, I've also got a Bryston BHA1 as the headphone amp to the
Right.
DAC, and that's kind of been the basis for my system for a while now, pretty consistently for a while. But I've owned a lot of shit audio gear. I've had the pleasure of owning a few Woo amps. Um, Gosh, I'm starting to blank because they're all just starting to mold together.
What
Um,
was your take on the Dave against the Yggdrasil?
so the Dave is very good at being able to place things in a layered sense from most intimate to like furthest away, the like greatest
Mm-hmm.
distance away from the ears that sounds can be reproduced by, say,
So
a
the range
headphone
of
or a
depth.
speaker. Yeah. But the problem is that it's more of a two-dimensional kind of um, line that is being drawn for each sound to appear in.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that a singer is like right against the microphone, and it was chosen that the mix is such that like that singer is supposed to be like right in your ear, and then off in the distance there's like little chimes, and you there's a sense of that the singer only exists in a couple layers, um like very close to the microphone, and even like some of the overtones they only go so far, and then like those chimes that are way in the distance, they never seem to be able to appear, like those particular frequencies, they don't seem to appear any closer than where they appear in that like two-dimensional layering.
Mm-hmm.
So what I instead opted for was something that um was essentially an upgrade to it, which was the M scaler, and that kind of made that go away. But then it just seemed like there was so much locked up in the source gear of just the DAC and an upsampler that I didn't really feel comfortable owning that anymore,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what I wanted to hear as far as a natural timbre to the music listening experience. And yeah, I ended up I ended up selling it. Um, Now, in comparison to the Yggdrasil, I feel like the Yggdrasil gets the timbre right, but some of the distortion characteristics to me are not pleasing. So there seems to be I don't know, there seems to be kind of like a tube like quality
Mhm.
to how things can appear when you're listening. So there seems to be like a constant low level, if I could call it like noise, where it makes everything sound pleasing,
Mhm.
but at no point is it like absolutely top tier. And so it, you know, if it's nines all across the board and then there's nothing that gets a 10, then I feel like that's not necessarily the DAC for me. Like I would like to have something that's tens
Right.
across the board.
Right.
So yeah, in the defense of the Yggdrasil, I like the timbre and a little bit of that dryness there, where everything is pretty like effortless. But when it comes to the Dave, and even with the addition of the M scaler, to me it sounds like it's like a really intense and aggressive presentation of certain instruments, and then others it's like really laid back. So it you get like this warm, bright um, listening experience where it feels like a hi-fi room show where maybe it's like horn speakers
Mhm.
or yeah, something like that where like the lower frequencies are like really laid back and you're chilling, and then like certain instruments come through and they just like really pierce through.
Mhm.
And I don't know, after a while that gets kind of fatiguing. So
I like the description of
it's a very
the.
long-winded, not written explanation of the Dave versus the Yggdrasil, but for me personally, I am much happier with the Yggdrasil than the
Mhm.
Dave, even after like hearing the lower level detail advantages that the Dave can provide, having the advantages of being able to locate something in a three-dimensional space so well with the M scaler. Yeah, it ended up being too much for me.
Right. I really like that description of the two lots of depth, but everything has sort of a two dimensionality to it. Because I mean, even just going to CanJam and getting a sense of what people are doing with source gear, where they're trying to capture the interesting qualities about tube equipment, while at the same time making it a solid state piece of gear. It's the kind of thing where it's like there's clearly something good going on there, but it's hard to kind of isolate and pinpoint and identify where the differences actually lie. And I think that description of you know the two dimensionality while at the same time retaining the depth character is super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I was just reading the chat here a little bit. Um, the source discussions are people don't necessarily agree on their sound. Yeah, I mean that's true. But a lot of it helps. It helps when you have a first of all like a extremely resolving headphone. Like if you have a headphone that's like top tier, think like LCD4 or like the Sysvara here. This is one of the community members actually sent this in. Um, and then you have a whole bunch of different source gear lined up and you're able to do volume matched comparisons. I find
Yeah,
that
too.
actually does yield the best uh, results for trying to identify differences.
Yeah.
But we should, I mean, we should probably get into. You mentioned it's a good topic to jump off on because so uh, Metal571 just recently tweeted a the article from Jason Stoddard on
I was just gonna talk. I was just gonna say that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a good
The
one.
it's the shit happened volume or whatever the latest volume is of that, and basically he's talking about what what people are rather than blind like ABX testing, but blind listening. He was saying that for stuff that he knew had more distortion on paper, people weren't able to actually hear a difference. between that and the thing that was supposed to be more, let's say, transparent. What are you? Have you had a chance to read that article, Flux?
I normally I keep up on the shit happened stories, but this is the first one that's kind of missed me.
Right.
And a lot of it is just within the last month. I've been doing a lot of catch up work, so I can imagine that for most people, and this is something that I feel like I have direct experience with, especially at my local college when I would do the local meets, circa, I'll say like 2016 to 2018. Most of the time, the initial tier, actually, let's make this even simpler. The normal tier list for what you're supposed to upgrade is typically regarded as headphones first, then amplifiers, then a DAC, or if you are an analog person, a turntable, or if you're a CD person, it's the transport or whatever. That kind of tier of like source gear. And then you're looking at like cables, and then beyond that, maybe switching out a spinning disk hard drive for a solid state, which at this point I don't know why you're not using solid state, but argument for another time. The point being that the initial reactions are usually always the headphones. Somebody is used to Beats for ages and ages and ages, and I'm speaking about this from a time when Monster still owned Beats. You take
that was Flux.
Yeah, actually. Yeah. No,
yeah, you
no
had
joke.
one for forever, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I had a Solo HD that when I first joined Discord, I added that as a photo with a Hugo 2, and it was quite the photo. But anyway, one of the things that somebody who's used to that like claustrophobic, like one note bass, just like the congested on ear nature of one of those Monster beats. When I would put an HD 800 on their head, even though it wasn't like an amazing rig at the time when I was doing this, it was simply just the sheer like soundstage, as cliche of a term as that is, like the soundstage of being able to hear things that are like so far away, but then also hearing certain vocals that are like seemingly in the room that you're currently in, instead of feeling like it's a reproduction.
Right.
Like when you get those kind of reactions, they then latch onto the headphone. So then it takes a very, very long time in order to hear, okay, I've heard this headphone and how it presents things 1,000 times now. I've heard so many different instruments, or rather you could say the same instruments on different tracks. And then only then do you start to hear the finer differences of being able to hear like what the amplifier is then sending to the headphone. Only then do you hear some of the DAC characteristics of, say, a drier tone, or something that is warmed and like N-shaped at the extreme ends of the frequency spectrum. That is the one thing that I feel like it takes a very long time, and it takes a resolving system in order to really hear those differences. Otherwise, even me, when I have heard like the benefits of going basically, price no object, cost no object, when you've gone that far, and then you can still go to, I don't know, what's the
DCS bar top?
simplest stack. Well, no, I was gonna say, what's the simplest stack? Like
the other direction.
like if you go to, say, as like cheap as it might be, like a 6XX and some $100 amp DAC stack or shit stack or whatever, and you go back to that, and it's only that. Like, are you really missing that much for the average listener for the average person that doesn't want to spend 5 figures on a whole system, like the benefits of those cheaper items, and even what is currently being engineered right now and we will soon see in the market in 2021 or 2022, like every single cheaper thing is going to get better and better, such that the upper end needs to differentiate itself more so now than what it used to a while back, when we're looking at an amp or DAC that's made in a not so in a, how do I say this in the most politically correct way? When it's coming from a place where the quality control is maybe not the same as it would be somewhere else, where it's a smaller operation, and and you're just hitting a price point and a profit margin instead of actually caring about what is going in and coming out. So yeah, but you mentioned the DCS Bartok. Yeah, that was definitely one of the highlights of Can Jam, and one of the things that really kind of hit home with me is that like an all-in-one unit can sound pretty good, even if there are some flaws. Like you can definitely just kind of like switch it on and enjoy yourself for many hours.
It's something that was one of the things I really liked about Can Jam, was the fact that everybody who had a piece of source gear that they wanted to show off, in spite of the fact that it was show conditions and not ideal for actually critical evaluations and stuff like that, people had every opportunity to get a chance to hear differences between DACs. And it was enough where I think if for the people who might be like on the DACs don't make a difference past a certain point train, even in show conditions like that where it's not not ideal, the differences are significant enough where you can actually, it'll change a person's mind, I think. So
Yeah.
that's why I think most people should, if they have an opportunity to go to a Can Jam, they should, because it's mind changing, I think.
Yeah, I have a couple of. So I'll address the chat. Everyone's trying to say I'm an objectivist and like ASR is the only real truth. All of that's wrong. All of it. Let's start out with that. The good thing about measurements is it tells you that it's not broken. That's it. There's nothing else that means. If the thing is that, and you can test this yourself, it's very easy to prove. If you go to any of the THD demos on YouTube, and you close your eyes and you wait, and there's this YouTube video that's great, and it slowly ramps up the harmonic distortion for you. And even on YouTube, with that compression, I guarantee you won't be able to hear it until a percentage that you will be really surprised by. And now compare that percentage to the percent harmonic distortion of basically every DAC that's ever been made in the last 5 years. It's not even close.
Yeah.
So if harmonic distortion was the only thing that mattered in a DAC, then that's not right.
And in headphones as well. Like there was that seminar at Can Jam where they were talking about how total harmonic distortion is not a good indicator of
it's definitely not. I think ratings actually had to make a couple of tweaks over time because I think they were talking with, I won't name them, but they were talking with somebody I know, and they kept ragging on ratings, like, you guys cannot be like assigning scores based on this THD at this level. Like, you have to at least weight it differently in the bass versus everywhere else, because it's such a bad indicator.
Is especially in humans, like bass distortion is one of the like extreme faults of human hearing, is that like actually identifying bass distortion in most people, it's terrible.
Well, actually, that
relative to the rest of the frequency spectrum.
That's it's something where actually one of the folks in Discord, I was just chatting with them recently about this, but there's this interesting question on my mind lately about the difference between planar bass and dynamic driver bass, where with dynamic drivers you do have the advantage of the excursive capabilities. You get more, well, not all the time, but often you get a punchier, kind of more slam kind of sound, whereas the planar bass tends to sound a little bit tighter, more controlled and articulate. And the question is, I know you probably saw the conversation, but the question is, which one of these is more appropriate, which one is more realistic. And I tend to think, as much as I prefer the planar bass, I actually think that the dynamic driver bass is the one that's the more realistic one. And so it kind of it splits into this question of, you know, what is the best sound, because you might have something that's technically the best sound and that doesn't always line up with something that's the most realistic. And so, you know, you could go either way on this. You could have a spectrum here and go one way or the other. And I still don't know really the answer to that question. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, me personally, I would say that, and I kind of recently was a bit more public with it, so I don't think it comes as much of a surprise to either you or Metal, but specifically with dynamic drivers, I feel like for natural instruments, for instruments that are either, you know, something that a live musician has to play, more classically defined instruments like your violins, your, well, I guess for bass, it's strings, horns, brass, woodwinds, whatever, drums, all of that to me sounds better reproduced on a dynamic driver, and specifically with bass, it sounds more natural, even if there are qualities to that that may show up on a total harmonic distortion measurement that ends up saying, well, this is, you know, there's a fatal flaw here. The total harmonic distortion at 20 hertz is 10%. But if it sounds correct, and if it sounds like it would in a
concert hall,
or in a like sound treated room, then I don't know. To me, I'm more inclined to go with that. Whereas something like a planar magnetic headphone, particularly in the bass, I think it does quite well with more artificially doctored sounds. If you're looking at anything that is, you know, bedroom produced, or if it is highly edited electronic music, or recordings even from real life, but then are altered in some way in a studio, to where it is no longer natural in effect for whatever sound they are going for, then I tend to feel like planar bass in particular can reproduce that more artificial bass better for that application. But at the same time, when you take those planar, like, say for instance the LCD4 versus Borealis or the Utopia or something else that's a high-end dynamic headphone, if you take those two and you then switch the roles, they don't sound terrible, but they do, to me, they start to lack the real, like, close to the original recording kind of specialty that they previously had. So yeah, so I would say dynamics for natural instruments, planars for artificial, in terms of bass.
It's funny because I still think I prefer planars, but it could just be because, like, even because I happen to listen to music that's more instrument based, and I tend to even prefer planars there, even though I know that it's not as realistic as, like, let's say realistic. And it comes down to that question of, well, it's because we're dealing with recorded music, right? The question, I think, is, do we want to be able to perfectly represent recorded music, or do we want to perfectly represent live music? And I think those are kind of the two, where if we're perfectly representing the recorded music, maybe the planar is able to do this a little bit better, but it doesn't actually sound like that would if you were in the room when they were recording it.
And to a certain extent, then you also have to ask, then what about some of the other technologies that are currently in place right now? Like, does a recorded instrument session, does it sound, and this is more like an individualized question, does it sound more realistic on an electrostatic system? does something like
Right.
the headphone, does it sound more realistic on that, which is at the moment it is in a league of its own in terms of its technological implementation
Hmm.
in a headphone. Or you could look at a number of other types of driver counts or assemblies or whatever. Some of those might represent what you hear better. But I would say, generally speaking, for something that is more artificial, going away from the dynamic driver is better for me, whereas staying with the dynamic driver for the natural stuff is
Hmm.
what I prefer.
Hmm. But then you end up owning a ton of planers.
Exactly. Like I mean, I feel like I've owned about like 10 times more planers than I
Yeah.
have dynamic drivers. And I would have to say a lot of that is due to the fact that the HD800 for me was the king of dynamic
Right.
drivers for me personally for a very long time. So the only time I would try something out was if I had like if I wanted to try either another Sennheiser, like one from the 600 580 or 650, kind of that brethren of options, or if I wanted to try something from AKG or Biodynamic or Focal, any of those that kind of interested me. But I have to admit that especially early on, before I was like active on Discord, I was mainly interested in planers because they had the ability to, with very low distortions based on measurements, be able to reproduce 20, 30, 40 hertz
Hmm.
seamlessly. And I no longer felt the need for a subwoofer,
Well, back
which,
then, they were the ones that could actually extend all the way down, whereas dynamics they typically roll, especially the open back ones would
right,
typically roll off.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there's always going
Uh,
to be some roll off with the dynamics because I
yeah.
mean that's just kind of they have a primary resonance. I guess they figured out how to get them to roll off less. But yeah, even from talking to some manufacturers, the whole timbre thing is something that they don't disagree with actually, because a cone for a speaker. I mean, it's funny. You can see my vintage 30 guitar speaker back there. You can literally see it's a cone. Like
Right.
it's more of a point source, and one of the big differences between obviously planers and dynamic drivers is that the planer has a wavefront that's just flat and spread out and evenly distributed, and the cone is a lot more of a point source. So you're going to sound different one way or another, kind of like the way that apparently from that's what I've heard anyway. I can't confirm or deny that with measurements. I still think we don't have. That's a whole nother conversation, but there's got to be more measurements that we can eventually invent to figure out all these problems, the stuff that we can hear that nobody can measure yet.
Or they exist and we're not correlating them. We're not
Yeah, we're
including
not
them the
looking
way
at the
that we should.
data. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I
um,
was actually trying to get
yeah.
Sean Olive on the show and to try and ask him about
Oh,
that a little
really?
bit, but I didn't have time. So maybe
Oh,
maybe
okay.
another time we'll get him on.
That'll
But
be fun. He's
yeah,
very objectivist, so that'll be pretty fun for
yeah,
the chat,
yeah,
I'm sure as well. But
yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know, Metal. What's your take on, like, I mean, that question? Getting back to the shit audio thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I was gonna say since Flux hasn't read it, I mean that's probably one of the best things that I've seen written about source gear. The first major takeaway is that everybody overhypes the differences between source gear. Like the differences,
mhm.
it's so much more minuscule than the difference between headphones. So like if you are just getting into the hobby and you're trying to compare a bunch of DACs and amps and it's hard for you to tell the difference between headphones, it's not going to matter. And that's fine because you don't need to spend the money then. So yeah, so that's the first thing. There's very small differences, and so what the whole thing with the what Shit Audio did there to summarize the article some more is that they like put a blanket over all their sources, all decks, and they tested a lot of things. They tested different tubes, they tested different decks, amps. Nobody knew what any of them were. Not even Shit's own employees knew what they were. In fact, I think Shit said that the tubes they used, even when they rolled the tubes, were like they were put inside of a pipe, so that they didn't even know what tubes they were. The people putting them in didn't even know. So, and they get some really interesting interesting results from there. A lot of people couldn't tell the difference between tube amps and solid state. The people who did, some people preferred tube and some people preferred solid state. I think a lot of people preferred Delta Sigma over R to R for theirs. Yeah, there's some really interesting odd results, and they all volume matched all this stuff with, I think they said 0.02 to 0.05, somewhere around there, dB. Yeah, so it's... that was
Yeah,
one of the
I'm
most
looking at
interesting
it.
tests
Yeah,
I've seen.
0.02 dB.
0.02. Wow, I wasn't sure it was that low. That sounded too loud to me, but they really
Actually, hey,
went to the
Metal,
next
can you
level.
move a little
Yeah.
bit closer to the mic? You're a little bit quieter on this. I think
Oh,
somebody mentioned
did
that.
I get quiet again? Okay, I
Somehow,
was loud
yeah.
earlier. It's probably because it's further away. Okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also turn it up slightly. But yeah, so they did a really good test, and also they said that, expecting, what was it? Oh, putting people through ABX testing that's like really mundane and like listen to this track on this source and then this source. They didn't do that. They kind of just opened up their shit audio store there,
The shitter.
and yeah, right. And they just let people listen to their own music, and they decided for themselves, without any stress or whatever, what they liked better, and nobody knew what anything was. They just plugged in
Okay.
and they just switched, and that was it.
So
And so
more
that was
this
very
realistic.
interesting. Yeah.
So this is actually more like our experience at New York City, where
Yeah.
like they just had everything under a blanket. Nobody heard anything. It was just like, here's an adapter coming out of the amp. Plug your stuff in, and
Yeah.
then they'll switch it for you in kind of A/B, and ask you maybe which one you like more or less. Okay. So I briefly like glanced over the article.
Yeah.
I will definitely check it out.
Yeah. The
Especially-
ABX would be more like somebody is putting the headphones on you, or somebody is like, if you're comparing headphones, or like the blind testing where you literally have no like it's not a realistic
You have
way
no
that
idea
you would
what to
actually
expect, yeah.
evaluate. Yeah.
Right.
But it's that's what makes it great, because it's funny because all the objectivists always are saying, hey, we need ABX, we need blind ABX. What do you think that this is? Like, of all people, it's great that they are stepping up to say, hey, we tried this and the results were incredibly interesting. But one of the most important results is the differences were very small, and even for us who've been evaluating sound forever, for us the small differences make a big difference. And so we are like, oh, way better than this, and it's really not. It's still really
Right.
similar. That's been my
These-
experience with amps.
It's the
as well.
hyperbole that exists. I think that's
Yeah.
also partially because of like, if
It's-
you have one
Some
headphone,
forums have caused the hyperbole
Yeah.
to get out of control with
Yeah.
that, but it's still
Yeah.
small.
if you have one headphone and you have multiple sources that you're trying that headphone on, it might seem like it's a big difference, but nothing compared to if you're just using a different headphone.
Yeah,
and-
that's what I mean. Like, I think that source gear is really, at the end of the day, it's supposed to enhance slightly your experience. I don't think that people are like, if you listen to this headphone on this DAC and amp, it sounds broken, and that's pretty much never the case. The only case where that will happen, for example, is if you plug like a 598 into like a 120 ohm output impedance, because dynamic drivers with their huge impedance swing in the graph will cause a serious frequency response
Yeah.
shift. That's
So
different.
like a bobblehead crack, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
like,
but even like this, I have the Kayenne HA6 here. There's a 120 ohm output.
Oh,
120
really?
ohm. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know
And
it
for
had
one
that.
of the single-ended, yeah. And so I was playing around with the Utopia, and I actually
no.
measured it with the 120, and it's like the bass is just like way higher.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
I didn't know the Utopia could have this
didn't
much
you
bass.
also do that with the pendant as well?
Oh no, I didn't actually try the Utopia on the pen. That one's like what, 300 or something. It's ridiculous. But I
Okay.
wouldn't do that. Like to me that doesn't make a ton of sense. Like I think if you had low impedance headphones or something with an impedance bump there, like the Utopia does at around like 50 hertz. I think that's where it
Right.
changes. Then you would probably end up wanting to use the low output impedance because
Okay.
it would just be too much. I think because like even on the
Yeah.
120, I was like, this is too much. This is like maybe if you had under, I'd say over 10 but under 30, that would be appropriate for the Utopia. You wouldn't really want to go more than that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why people seem to, I don't know if this is still the case, but people really like the bottlehead crack with the 6x0 stuff, because
Yeah, because you're creating, you're adding
you're
the bass shelf.
thickening it further. I guess some people
Yeah.
want that, and then there's probably some harmonic distortion from the tubes on top of that. So
Yeah, but actually, so with that idea of like the question between like completely transparent versus like what I noticed a lot of the source manufacturers were talking about. Even like when I was talking with the guys from Lake People, Freed from Lake People,
Yeah.
and he was telling me about the Nagra. Not the Nagra. that's a different thing.
Don't get Flux
Nimbus.
started on the Nagra.
Yeah. No,
Oh no.
no, the Nimbus. Yeah. And the reason why the Nimbus sounds the way that it does is because they're trying to make it more tubey. And then I
Yeah,
asked,
they're
like,
trying
well,
to
what
make
is
it more tube-like. If I remember correctly, it was around, it's like negative 105 to 110 dB. They have, or maybe it's in a range from like negative 110 to 100 dB, where they are adding tube distortion characteristics.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
I remember getting that lecture before you put a camera in front of him. So because I had heard the Susvara on that Nimbus, and I was like, oh wow, this is pretty good. And I felt like, and I'm sorry that Max is not here to comment, but
he's
I
in the
felt
chat.
like,
Oh, he's in the
well,
chat actually. Yeah.
but I feel like in particular, Max's HE6, which actually formerly mine, Max's
I forgot about
HE6 sounded like really bad on that amp, and I was like, wow, this sounds like pretty underwhelming, not gonna lie. And then I don't know, I tried a few other headphones on it, and like it really seemed to be able to display some of like that what I'll call like the way that people describe the differences between, say, how do I put this, like the HD 800 versus the Utopia, and like what people kind of define resolution or like detail as. It really seemed to be able to differentiate something like the HE6 versus something like the Susvara, where both are pretty difficult to drive for most amplifiers relative to the rest of the landscape that is currently available right now. It seemed to be able to differentiate something that is like the HE6, where it needs a lot of power in order to sound a particular way. And then the Susvara seemed to be able to like effortlessly be driven and sound like really pleasing, even though, like, I will admit, it was meat conditions and it was not the most ideal, but I definitely had this kind of like wow moment of like, this is the first time I've heard Susvara at the show, when I then came back around with Max instead of the first time around when it was just me. It was the first time where I was like, wow, okay, so what I remember hearing before, it is true once again, even after hearing so many other things, hearing the 1266 on that Linus stack, hearing the Susvara at the in the Woo room with the WA33, with hearing it on so many different things. Yeah, I remember coming back and thinking like, wow, this is a very like I don't want to say like relaxing, but it was an engaging listen to be able to hear a solid state that didn't sound so solid state.
Well, that's, I mean, I think so much of it is the system and the synergy that's there, because even like when I was evaluating the pendant, like there were things about the pendant that I really liked, but it was only really noticeable with the Verite, right? Like it was like you needed to have the kind of synergy going on, and those qualities just didn't come through the way that I enjoyed them with the Verite, the way like that way when I was using certain other headphones. Like with the Elegia, I did not like it at all. It sounded like it flattened the treble a little bit, and it wasn't quite doing it for me. But then I'd go back to the Verite and be like, well, now I don't want to listen to the Verite on anything else. Right? Like it gets to the point where it's addictive, right? It's that engaging kind of quality.
So are you saying that we need to pair amplifiers with the or headphones and amplifiers from the same manufacturers?
Well, not necessarily. Actually, because that's amps and sound, right? So
Well, yeah, the original design is amps and sound, but
yeah,
Isn't the opinion on the Sennheiser amps like pretty poor?
yeah.
I
have
don't.
never tried them, obviously, but
The
I
HDV
yeah,
whatever.
820.
820 before
820.
the other 820. I don't know.
I
And then there's
wonder
the
how that would sound.
HVA or HVA 800.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
man.
then there's
was
the
before
Odyssey
that.
Deckard as well.
Deckard and the King.
Yeah.
I was
Is there a
okay.
King Mark
So can I? Okay. PSA to Odyssey. I was really hoping. I know you guys are like trying to show off other things, and you probably weren't wanting to haul all that gear, but I was really kind of hoping to hear the Deckard or the King or whatever at the Can Jam booth, even if it was just a smaller setup. I was really kind of
remember they-
hoping for that.
I think they brought it the first time I went, but that was 2 years ago. So
Right. So like,
I
yeah.
guess they don't. That is strange.
Do
that
they
don't.
make it themselves, or who is?
I don't
Is it like
think
someone else
so.
makes it for them? Yeah.
I think
would
somebody
imagine
else makes
so.
it for them, and they, because
In
of that
collaboration or
contract,
something.
they are allowed to put their name on it. But
I just
yeah,
know
I was,
that they
I was
like the
really kind of
chord
hoping to
stuff.
hear the King or the King 2 or whatever, and hear
Yeah.
that, like, in the same way that the 1266 has the 11 audio
Stuff that's made
stack.
specifically for it. Yeah.
Right. In the same
Yeah.
way, I was kind of hoping for that with the Odysseys, specifically with the LCD4. Hey, I like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like then the Nagra stack kind of
The Nagra stack.
made that happen. Even more so than I want to admit.
Wait, how much is the DAC for that?
The DAC, the last I checked, was about 38,000,
Jesus.
brand new.
That's crazy.
And I was kind of hoping for like a friends and family discount. And also can't forget the power supply.
Right.
I honestly I have not found the price on that. There was an Audiogon listing for 10,000. So then the Audiogon listing for the
just
other
the
one,
power supply.
right? And then the Audiogon listing for the DAC then was 18,000, I think is what it sold at. So that's why it was 28. Yeah. Well,
This
you
is
know
why-
what?
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Sorry to
this is
interrupt.
why I want
gonna
to.
say,
I want to quit audio.
No, this is why I think source gear is fascinating to like A, B, X. I haven't had that many experiences with it. That's probably why. But oh my god, I just don't have the patience for it. It's just as somebody who is not used to listening to different sources very often. It's like it takes so long to evaluate. I've done it before with an A/B switch at home. Like I really tried it when I think ZMF sent me the a loaner of what is it the Felix Audio Elise at one point.
Or is it the Euphoria?
No, it was the Euphoria. That's right. Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
about to correct
Hard to get
myself.
those. I found at least in.
Yeah, they sent me that.
Maybe it's just in Canada, but.
And then they, yeah, I don't know. And then they sent me the Amethyst, and so I A-B'd. I think I was using a Shitmodi multi-bit at the time, which I found out was horrible. Because
How did you find that out?
what was funny was A-B'ing between that DAC and the Amethyst made way more of a difference than A-B'ing between a Magni 3 and the Euphoria. It sounds weird, but that was my impression, and I didn't know what the hell was going on with like either one of them in terms of like what one was supposed to sound like versus the other. So I highly doubt I really had a serious bias toward one or the other, but still the difference was so small with the DACs that it took me like a couple of hours of just going like, okay, let's try this. Okay, let's try this song. Okay, let's try this. Go back and forth, back. Oh my god, it's just so
You have
boring.
to find the same. At least the way I do
section
it.
of the same song.
Yeah, the same section where there's like, yeah, and like you got to find it where like you can isolate. Like for me, it's
something about the
something with like
response of the
yeah,
soundstage,
yeah, like if you pick up on like cello sounds and then it's like you have one cello line or something like that, and that's all you're really listening to, and it's like for 30 seconds at most, even less than that probably, and then you just switch to the other one and do the same thing.
So many times though,
Yeah.
and you get tired of listening to that song that you loved and you hate it now. And that's most of my listening. No, I'm kidding. Thankfully, only one playlist, which isn't like that long, I'm sick of, but But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience. Now someone was like, "Oh, multi-bit measure is bad, so that's why it was bad." No, 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 no. I had another experience recently where I compared the Hugo 2 to the Ifi Pro ICANN, and it was very clear that the Hugo 2 had more resolution. Now I'm talking about like 1% maybe
Oh,
on the
that was the
Utopia.
Stellio?
IDSD.
Oh, Utopia. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Utopia. I was using the Utopia for
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
And like, oh my God, yeah, it was small, but like I was at the local dealer and I was like, I turned to him and I was like, am I going crazy? And then I asked everybody on Discord, and they're like, "Oh no, no, that's the Pro I can is kind of hazy like that in the highs." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I guess I can tell the difference between amps, and I'm pretty sure those two don't measure that badly, if I remember right.
Well, the Pro
Especially Hugo
ICANN?
2. Hugo 2 is like, I mean, the chord's obsessed with measurements too,
So
aren't
Yeah.
they?
yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was the Hugo 2. Did you have the M scaler at the
No,
time?
no, no. It's just a
Okay.
regular Hugo
So yeah,
2.
it was the
Yeah.
Hugo 2 and the Ifi Pro IDSD. Both of them
Yeah.
are like separate DACs
Pro IDSD
going
is
into
a
the
DAC.
Pro ICANN. So it was
Oh, okay,
using the
okay.
same amp,
Yeah.
but you had the Hugo. Yeah. So
I got you. I got you.
yeah.
No, I think I was
so
using the Hugo 2 built-in DAC with its own amp, and then the stack of the Ifi was what I was comparing to. So it was probably a lot more going on at once there.
okay.
So I guess I
figured it
didn't
was
really
just like the flip
isolate.
of a
I wanted
switch.
to I wanted to have more of a difference, I guess, because I just
Right.
wanted to see.
Yeah, because otherwise you're running everything through the same, whatever the bottleneck ends up being.
Yeah,
and
I
it's going
forget
through the same.
exactly what you guys
Yeah.
said. Maybe the IDSD is not this. Is the link in the chain? I'm not sure, but like
That's
No,
this
I
guy right here. I don't think it's the. I think it's the Pro ICANN.
it's probably yeah.
I
Okay.
would
But
think
I
the
actually-
Pro ICANN is the weak link in that
But
chain.
I like the Pro ICANN because it's so versatile. Like you could run literally anything off of it.
It has a million different settings. And
Yeah.
a ton of
And,
power.
like,
I will say that.
That's I mean for the headphone. Like somebody was asking me recently, what's the ideal like source for the headphone? And apart from like you could go down the rabbit hole there all you want, but like I think one of the better options is the Ifi Stack, the Pro ICANN and Pro IDSD, specifically because
you
it
can customize
has
your sound.
and it
definitely
has
sounded better.
Yeah, yeah.
The headphone at Can Jam. Off
well,
of
and
that
it has like
versus-
14 watts or something ridiculous, right? Like it has
Oh,
it
yeah.
has the power to be able to actually handle it,
Yeah,
right? So
definitely.
yeah, with all these other sources, it's like they might sound good for most headphones, but if you really need the power, they can't quite. Hey, there it is.
Yeah. So
Hey, do you have the
this,
headphone?
this
Yes.
yeah. So this in particular, it sounds so much better at home when
There you
it's
go.
connected to either the Yggdrasil, the Dangerous Convert 2, the
See, I'm not crazy.
Dave, like everything I've had it connected to, it has sounded so much better than what I had available to me at Can Jam. And
Was
that's
it?
really saying something because like the IFI booth was what really opened it up as far as like, okay, so I'm hearing what's possible, but I'm still not sold. Like
Yeah.
I was kind of iffy.
Had you heard it
and-
before, like at a previous like a
No.
prototype? Okay.
No. So that was the thing is that when I heard it at Can Jam, the first time I heard it was the TT2, and that was it.
Tabletop.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Chord TT2.
Yeah.
And they were using it with the 1/4 inch out on the front, and I've heard that
Yeah.
you're supposed to use the XLRs at the back.
Got it. Yeah.
So that's why my initial impressions were they were good, and I talked to Freddie and I was
Mhm.
like, I'm glad I ordered one. And then I heard it at I heard the TT2 at the Odyssey booth, and I was like, okay, so yeah, I picked up on like what was wrong with the TT2 in particular as far as the headphone amp.
Right.
So I know like this thing is capable. I just don't like the TT2.
Right.
And then tried the Phonitor, didn't like that. Tried the
Yeah,
Ifi Stack,
yeah.
finally liked that, and I was like, okay, so I know what it's capable of. But I felt like every single demo unit that was at Can Jam New York, when you got to the bass, it was just really congested, and it started to overwhelm the soundstage, such that you had like really high frequencies, like, well, actually, hey, I got a camera here. So really high frequencies were like right here, and then you just had like this wall, like starting here all the way to the headphone. It was just all bass, and it just like
Interesting.
It just seemed like 100 hertz
odd.
and lower was just totally plugged with
yeah.
bass. And
Interesting.
it made for an experience that I was not looking forward to. And especially when I was going to send this thing around, I was going to be like, hey guys, like, make sure you listen.
Resolve lied to me.
Yeah, well, not necessarily Resolve lied to me, but basically it was like, make sure that when you're using it, like, keep in mind that if it's going to be something that's extremely bass heavy, this is going to happen. So maybe kind of like curated tracks, but trying to just be like, hey, this seems to be a flaw. But if I can take a moment, Metal was mentioning him earlier. Shout out to Bloom Audio, because this unit right here is awesome for me. Like,
when you were trying it at the Ifi Stack, do you know if it had the incremental bass boost?
Yes. Yeah.
It did
so
have
we
like
tried
20%
it on the
or whatever.
Yeah, we tried it on the ICANN. And then I'm pretty sure like Max and we both tried it on the IDSD. We tried it then with the IDSD feeding the ICANN, and we tried the different bass boosts. And we did find that, like, if you increase the bass a little bit, not like the full bass boost on the IFI,
Right.
it
You
did
have
get
like
much better.
You have incremental, analog increases there.
Right.
And that's actually the cool thing about the Ifi Stack that I wasn't aware of before, is that all of that stuff is analog for all, even like the.
Wait, there's like a knob you can tune it? I thought it was presets.
No, it's
Oh.
it is presets, but it's like you have an incremental, like 20% or 30%.
Right.
You can.
It's not like some of the lower end
yeah.
IFIs where it's
Yeah,
just
it's not like a
on,
button or a
off.
switch. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah, but it is also analog, even on the, from what I understand, even on the ones that are DAC amp combos, like the hip DAC here, this guy, like this has the bass boost as well, but that's also supposedly all just analog. I don't necessarily care if it's analog or digital, because I EQ stuff anyways, but I know there are people who care, and they're like, analog only. So
I mean, I personally preferred the sound of an analog EQ, but
well, you think it's more natural because you don't have, it's already past the DAC's point, or the point of the DAC, right? In the chain.
Yes, and then also the amount of like fine-tune adjustments that I've had at my disposal with a digital EQ versus an analog one. Normally, if I'm doing analog EQ, I'm just using it a little bit, like I'm not using a ton. So with the digital EQ specifically, like when I was previously using Audizies that needed a lot of digital EQ, it had a certain characteristic to it. And then if I were to just kind of disable the amount of adjustments and then just keep it to about the same amount of adjustment on analog versus digital, I kind of felt like the analog was a little bit better in terms of having a less harsh result at the end of it. So like I said, me personally, I prefer the analog EQ, but I would personally prefer to not EQ at all. But
do you use?
Even I agree with that. I mean, like,
yeah, I would prefer not to. But if I have to, first step is going.
Are you
God.
using something analog for this right now? Like,
no, I'm not.
He's analog EQing with something.
No. No,
So
if anything, my EQ of sorts is the amps and the DACs.
Oh, right.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So,
but like, so for right now with the LCD4, I mean, do you use the reveal stuff at all,
Nope.
or no? Okay.
No. Now I will say.
I think you tried it at one point, right? But
yeah, I did try it, and in fact, I think in my foobar settings, I have like the reveal plugin, and I have the ability to switch that on, off, whatever. And I've tried it, but honestly, oh man, when I use the LCD4, I'm more inclined to just use it as is. The same with like the Susvara, the Diana, the headphone.
Susvara, I don't even know what I would EQ on this. Like, this is to me so
maybe
far.
a little bit of treble, just
yeah,
down
7K is a little bit hot, but it's
Yeah.
not like
Nah,
the
man.
Aria.
For
No.
serious audiophile music, it's okay.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that actually.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of like the other headphones that I have, most of the time, I would actually say like the only one that I'd be willing to EQ is probably the HD 800, and even then, like the mods that I have on it
Right.
at the moment, kind of take care of that for
They
me.
definitely
So
help it, yeah.
yeah,
I definitely would prefer to mod than EQ just because I don't need to worry about like which preset I'm using and could just have it be on the headphone and
my
then I don't want to mess with
Yeah.
like too much of that. Like I
the
have
amount of
my
the amount of
list
times
is
that I've
just like
measured and had an EQ applied, it's
yeah.
I know it's only on an ears. I get it. It's not that like accurate of a system, but the amount of times that I've goofed up a measurement because of EQ being applied,
Well,
it's way too
there's
high.
that, but then also yeah, no, that's a huge problem.
That's a
Like
good one.
for anybody who's reviewing headphones or even posting impressions, and you have one of those, you can't use EQ. Like it has to be like you have to be sure that it's off because like otherwise you'll mess up and then risk publishing something that people are going to use and reference.
Yeah, one
And
time
it's
I
totally wrong.
I used the ears to EQ the bass of the 650 to get it to be flat, which was fine. But obviously, if you crank it up, as anyone who's owned one of those knows, it's gonna fall apart in terms of harmonic distortion at higher volumes. Like you can get the 650 to
Audibly,
extend
yeah.
like a planar, but yeah, well, most importantly, audibly, you can hear the bass start to bleed into the upper bass and the low mids if you really start cranking it. So
So
you
this
gotta
is
be careful.
yeah,
with
this
that.
is one of the things that I thought was interesting at CanJam was the Ifi and Drop collaboration on that
Oh no.
I didn't even see what that
yeah,
was.
on that little
Oh,
amp
no.
DAC with the 6XX bass boost.
I didn't try that. Did you actually try that?
Yeah.
thing?
So
Oh,
Matt,
no.
Is
Matt
it like
and
a
I
del-
tried it, and it okay. No shenanigans here. Like it didn't sound as bad as like looking at a graph and seeing like, oh hey, it's gonna have like what 10 dB bass boost. But I mean, also you're talking about like in a meet environment where a lot of those 20 to 30 hertz, like a lot of that information is
Exactly.
pretty much gone. So like, and especially hearing that kind of distortion at a meet, if there is any audible to the ear,
Mm-hmm.
with the human ear being flawed, then
Yeah.
like for me personally, it was not as bad as like what the measurements seem to indicate, and like what I know about the 650, especially having a 6XX for like many years now, and so many other people having a 650 for many years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not expecting
I
those
think,
kind of
yeah.
results from that EQ, even
You have
though
to
I have
use it
seen
at home.
people I've seen people like try and EQ that to the 6XX
Yeah.
to have sub bass.
I think
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
not listening at like splitting volumes, it actually sounds pretty decent.
Right.
And that's my classic EQ for it doesn't give it a shelf. Oh my God, Oratorius tries to give it a 5 dB shelf. Don't do that. That's one of the things I would not do with that headphone. The most bass boost you probably should apply to it is trying to flatten out the bass. Because if you try to give it a shelf, it's gonna go into harmonic distortion territory way too fast.
Yeah.
I have to interrupt here a little bit. Fei Long is in the chat, and he's the one who is lending me this for review, and he's asking which pads I preferred. He actually put some Bayer Dynamic pads on here originally, which was I was surprised at how good it sounded like with the Bayer Dynamic pads. That like when I first looked at it, I was like, what's going on with the pads here? Because it didn't remind me of any Hi-Fi Men pads that I was used to. But I've switched it now to the stock pads, and I do actually think that I prefer the stock pads. But I also am not sure if it's because I took out the foam like in front of the driver. Just to answer your question there. Sorry, yeah, to interrupt there. I'll let you.
No, that's
continue
fine.
on the
That's
No,
fine.
it's fine. Actually,
Try to pay attention to the chat a little more.
I think we were talking about modding versus EQing too, and
Yeah.
one of the things that's interesting about that is some people will try to put, like foam or toilet paper or whatever. Toilet paper, very short supply. Don't use it right now, but in front of the driver, and to try to tame the treble. But what's interesting about that is sometimes that can add extra grain to the treble of it, not just bring it down. So I thought that was
You bring
pretty
it down, but
interesting.
you introduce
Yeah, you're
issues.
muffling the right. Your front.
Yeah.
That's why front damping is something that I think is generally something that people try to avoid doing, at least manufacturers, because of that reason. And so that I find that pretty interesting because there's been manufacturers that have actually installed a EQ filter into the wire inside the headphone instead of adding additional damping, and
What
they
is
thought
this?
that sounded better.
The cipher cable.
Oh yeah, cipher cable.
No, that's active. I'm talking about passive. In
Oh,
fact,
passive.
you guys
Okay.
have probably
Okay.
seen that
Gotcha.
Odyssey has added. I think one of the things they did, and I think this was acknowledged on HeadPhi. For example, they retuned the XC at one point, and I think they also applied this to the EL8 closed. As they put a filter, they put an
Oh,
RC
yeah.
filter in the middle of the path of the cable before it comes out of the headphone. So they actually built in an analog EQ filter into the headphone instead of adding additional damping to try to adjust it, which is very interesting because I think they said something about it could have affected the soundstage or the resolution more negatively if they had applied physical damping than just adding a filter. So that was actually really interesting. So yeah, they're not.
So, but
afraid to
that's
do that
in
either.
the headphone, not in the
Yeah.
cable, but it's actually at the at that
And it's
point.
not active. It's a passive filter
Yeah.
using like a resistor and a capacitor. I don't know what you guys know about EE, but yeah, if you add RC, oh yeah, that's right. Max correctly mentions here Etymotic actually raises. Yeah, don't they put like an impedance? Yeah, they put an impedance adapter on it, and that adjusts the frequency
So does
response a lot too.
64 Audio, I think, for some of their
They do
IEMs, not
that,
all
yeah.
of them. Linear impedance. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that doesn't
Yeah.
get talked about much, but that's another option actually that
I
manufacturers
guess
have.
technically, like the IE. Well, I guess that's more digital. Maybe the IE.
I don't actually know what
from
that does.
Ifi.
This, yeah. I have mixed feelings about this. I'm surprised I still have it. It does fix all the issues with hiss, but it attenuates the signal.
Oh, okay.
I have the feeling that this actually, when you're using it on ultra mode, I have the feeling that it actually does take away from the sound. I think, it's not just an impedance change. There is an impedance change as well. And when you take it to the ultra mode here, for like really sensitive stuff, it reduces the volume by like 12 or something. It's 12 dB. It's a lot. But it reminds me of what happens if you're using any kind of audio editing software and you reduce noise. You can often toggle a switch that plays back what it's reducing, so it plays back the sound that it's eliminating. And I have the feeling that if you had that option with this, it would actually it would play back some sound. And so that makes me think that it might fix the hiss issues, but at the same time it might also reduce the overall sound quality to some extent.
Yeah, obviously you still want to minimize, and the chat is not going to be. It's going to be very confused by me saying this, but you want to minimize the amount of EQ you apply to a headphone. It doesn't matter if it's analog or digital.
Right.
You obviously want to have it physically tuned, but if you're at the point where you have the option between, physically tuning hurting something else and EQing, then sometimes you never know. You might want to go with the other one. So it's interesting.
It's that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like people like us paying extremely close attention to the most insignificant differences, very minor differences that where to us it might matter a lot, but for most people who are buying a HD6XX or even like maybe they're buying a Sandara or they're buying, go up the price range to something under $1,000. I think EQ is something that whatever's less desirable about EQing is not enough to, warrant the difference between that and like a $10,000 system or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
I still think that most people should just buy, either a 6XX with a Modi 3 or an S Stack and an Atom or a Magni 3.
yeah.
Or, if you don't even want to buy an amp, you could buy an LCD 1. If you want to upgrade slightly, you can from the LCD 1 to something better than the 6XX. There's the Sandara, that sort of thing. But you still need an amp for that, of course. But
Or you could just,
stuff like that. But going
ignore
beyond
that
that is-
altogether, do Bluetooth to a Mobius,
Yeah, actually, I recently switched to the Mobius from the 371, which I'm wearing right now at work, and
I still need to review that.
I have not gone back. My head had to get used to the weight again because I don't know that. Oh my god, the LCD2 closeback did something to my neck. I don't know why, but I'm slowly training it back so that I can wear it like even the LCD2
Training it with
again.
light headphones.
Well, the
We're just
Mobius,
giving it a break.
right. So this is like 250 grams, and then the Mobius is 350 or 360. I measured
That's
it.
still not super heavy.
And then I put the gel pads on it, and people don't know this, but the optional gel pads on it add like almost 100 grams to the thing. So now it weighs like 450 grams or something. And I'm using it like that at work right now. Working my way up to wearing an LCD2 for more than like an hour and a half slowly, and then I can move back to where Flux is at the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it, man. Like at this point, I'd be like, ugh.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
my neck would be breaking.
So that's the thing is like
it doesn't affect you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like the only time that I've ever had an issue with weight is when it's not distributed properly. And for me on my head, there's been 2 instances of that being the case. One being the Rawson Audio Design 0. That for me with the original head pad.
Right, because they changed they ended up making it a little bit.
Right. And at the moment, the one that I have is the original. So for me personally, I have a lobe strap that I use to get rid of that. At the moment, it's installed on the Dianify here, so that the little padding that is there, which I mean, basically there's none.
Shout out to lobe straps, by the way. I got one for the Verite.
Like
I'm
this
that much
is
of
the
a necklet.
savior for me for anything that's like not comfortable.
That's not a CMF strap.
I know, right?
It's not.
I
need to get one too.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
It's worse for mine.
Waiting for the co-pilot pads to be shipping out. So, but yeah, as far as like comfort goes, the lobe strap on a Rawson Audio Design 0, and then technically, and I know this is going to be really odd, but like the Ether 2 to me is not comfortable because whatever the like natural resting for the headphone, it ends up like down here. It presses too much on the jawline. So then after you wear it for like 2 hours, you take it off, and it's not immediately, noticeable when it's on your head because it's light. But then when you take it off, it becomes like this vice grip kind of thing where it's like, and now the pressure's released. And
because it is all about the pressure that it creates, and that's one of them. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I found that to be like the most comfortable headphone I'd ever worn because it was so light.
Wait, really? I thought your review a long time ago of
the Ether 2.
Was it the Ether 2? I thought you had to like send it back or something.
Oh yeah, that's because of the. I thought the planar crinkle was like a defect.
Oh,
is that
what it was?
Oh
my
gosh!
Comfort. I don't know why.
But it wasn't actually a defect. It was just because it just does not fit with my head at all. Like the comfort was great, but because it creates a seal with the pads and everything, like, or either that or it's because it's like I have like a beard, and that's what my guess was, and that like it was breaking the seal every time I moved my head from side to side, which sucked. I had to like sit like physically really very still in order for it to not crinkle. But nobody else had that issue that I mean, not as far as I could tell. Like I've
never had that issue on Mr. Speaker's Dan Clark Audio product.
Yeah, none of the rest of them have had that issue for me, and that's why both of them they sent me another one because they're like, oh well, we don't want you to review one that is potentially damaged, so they sent me another one, and
you still ran into
still had that issue. Yeah, for me, but only me apparently. That's it's like my head shape just doesn't work with that, even though it's really comfortable. It just didn't
that
work.
was one of the things that was eye-opening for me to hear about, like the LCD2s that people were buying on the B stock sales. Like I have never had that issue on any Odyssey ever. Like I don't know if it's the pad shape and there's like a seal, like just enough of a seal broken on the back part here to where I don't get like a vacuum. But when I heard people saying like I feel like I've got like this additional like airplane pressure on an Odyssey, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about,
Well, when
but
you first put them on, I think sometimes
Doesn't it
that'll
create
happen.
yeah,
a
sometimes
seal? Yeah.
sometimes
'Cause,
it does.
yeah,
It'll create that seal.
they're a
But
front. Yeah,
also,
the
I've
design
got
is a
like
front
thick
seal
glasses,
volume. Yeah.
so maybe it's that too. And then
Oh,
I
it
started
definitely
playing
could be
around with
glasses.
things,
Yeah,
and I was able to replicate it, and then from there I was
definitely.
able to like address the occasional person on Discord being like, why is my LCD2 crinkling, or you know. But definitely the Rawson was the one that did it the most, and that was the thing that like actually scared me when I was
It's
using
funny,
it, because it was
didn't do it for me
crinkling
at all.
so
It was fine
much.
for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a question for you guys from the chat.
Okay.
Does the DMS Dianify change texture, soundstage, and slam? Is it close to the LCD4? I'll let you guys weigh in on that. Metal, I'll let you go first.
Actually, I think Flux is way more qualified to answer that because he owns one and has had a lot more experience and head time with it. I have to say it. Now, I didn't directly. Yeah. Plus, it's literally he has one. He also has a DMS mod right now. I forgot about that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you know what? I will say though, just briefly, when I listened to it, I was pretty impressed. I thought the Dynafy had a lot of resolution already, but DMS tells us that the pads actually make the most difference in his mod. So really, all you need to do is get the pads, and then it's like a Density 4 with more mids. I think. I don't know how the slam and soundstage and stuff and dynamics compare. So that
Soundstage was impressive to me. Like
Okay.
well, because I was comparing it to the Dianify, and so his pad mod definitely made the soundstage
really?
more
I didn't even know
laterally
it
well
did that
defined.
too.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
definitely. Because the Dianify, maybe it's just the way that fits me. The default
Okay.
Dianify, even like at the show, like the one that they had with the updated pads from the
Yeah.
V2.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
These are the OG pads,
Yeah.
and they are not comfortable at all. And the V2 pads, while technically not the originals, I feel like are a better representation of what people were wanting to go for
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to like actually experiencing what Abyss had to offer.
Yeah.
So sorry for that aside, but yeah, the pads definitely make a difference, because going from something that's like the original
Okay.
to the DMS one,
Mm-hmm.
it's worlds different
For stage as well, like
for
all those
stage, because
Yeah.
it technically, because of the original pads, they are so stiff that they keep the headphone
Yeah.
so far removed, like the I don't know, to me the driver, there's so much empty space then that it becomes way more free field, and it no longer, like, to me the bass characteristics, they go away. The
Oh, I see.
for my head and for my ears,
Yeah.
they really go away. The treble becomes a bit too peaky and like piercing, and
Did you find that
amount of headache that is generated because of that is just enormous. So, but
and
yeah,
for the
sorry, go
soundstage
ahead.
with that, oh, I was just saying with the soundstage of the original, it felt like, or at least with those OG pads that you just had, it felt like it was like one side, and then immediately crossed over to the other, and there was no gradual, panning across the front when something was
Correct.
supposed
Yeah,
to be.
there was no center imaging.
Yeah. Whereas with the the DMS Dianify, it was like, whoa, like I'm suddenly inside the space that it feels like a stage again, like a proper headphone. And
See,
I think
and
that's that's
I
what
agree
DMS was
with
telling
that,
us that
even
people are
with the
supposed
Diana
to have.
V2.
Yeah.
With the V2.
Oh, with the new
pad
pads.
changing.
Yeah. But I still recommend the DMS pads because I think that would be far more comfortable as well.
Yeah, I think it's more applicable on more systems.
Yeah.
For more people to have the DMS version with those pads, as opposed to like my personal favorite, even though I got to have the DMS Diana in my hotel room at Can Jam, it was, I think I actually prefer the Fi with the Diana V2 pads
over the DMS Diana.
Yeah, over the DMS Diana,
Interesting.
but also consider that my tastes seem to be all over the place, like my favorite being the LCD4, but yet I can still enjoy like something like an HE6 or a
Right.
Susvara or something that has a different sound presentation or whatever. But I
HD800.
guess yeah, HD800 with how
Yeah.
kind of classically off that FR is. But yeah, with the Abyss Diana-Fi with the V2 pads, that was one of the surprises for me
Mm.
at Can Jam.
I still
Whereas
found it pushed into the temples a little bit. Just a little bit. Whereas the DMS ones are more like angled to the bottom,
oh
a bit
yeah,
thicker on the bottom and not quite as thick on top.
right. And
Yeah.
I do feel for comfort, it
Mhm.
was significantly better,
Yeah.
especially with at the time only having DMS's personally modded pair. So therefore, the head pad that was on his instantly made his way more comfortable. On top of the fact that then also the pads were more comfortable as well.
Right.
So there was a kind of twofold thing that
Mhm.
the further away that I get from those moments, the harder it is to recall every minute detail. But
Mhm.
yeah, the particularly what I remember was that the comfort was just so much better on the DMS Diana, and then also like if you pair that with the correct system and you match what its characteristics are and trying to get the most out of each part of its um, out of the character out of that particular headphone with the pads, then I can see it being really good for a lot of people. But me personally, I thought that Pathos amp was
Oh yeah.
was really good with the regular Diana Phi, and
I was
I would have, if I had the cash on hand, I would have just been like, okay, let's own this and let's
the
have this be like the Abyss stack.
the V2. I like the Diana V2. I was disappointed by because I was thinking that the Diana V2 would be close enough to the Diana Phi in terms of like detail and capability.
Right,
But if he's right that they measured the same, man, is it ever a difference? Like it is
right.
clear how different that is in terms of detail and technical performance.
I
You just need this, and then you're in.
oh my yeah.
Yeah.
Better
So
better yet, just install Spotify
Oh
or
wait,
yeah,
guys,
install
I
Spotify on
upgraded.
your
I
game
upgraded a
console.
lot.
Ooh.
there's a big
Yeah,
spender over here.
install Spotify on your
Still
game
have these
console and
things.
just plug a Diana Phi into your controller. It's instant high res.
Yeah. Put a sticker on it.
I'm gonna plug it into my ThinkPad.
I wanted to. I wanted to ask you, Flux. I mean, I know you own both the LCD4 and the Susvara.
Yes.
Which do you think has better detail? Let's say.
Hmm. I'd
And
probably say
also,
the I'd probably say the Susvara has better detail in terms of um, being what more people would associate with detail. And
is it just because of its tonality more
I,
so?
I think part of it is the mid range and the lack sorry, the difference in mid-range recessions and the overall characteristic of each one. Like the Susvara has a mid-range recession at around 2K
Yeah, like
or 2
most hi-fi
kilohertz.
mids, they tend
A
to
little
have
bit
that
of a
signature. Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Whereas the LCD4, I still haven't asked for mine to be measured because at this point I really don't care. I love it. I'm not I don't really, for something that I know I'm going to own long term, I really don't care.
Yeah.
Till
It's
LCD5
something
comes
that is
out.
pleasurable to listen to. But as far as like for like upper end treble, to me it is more noticeable and it's easier to pick out on the Susvara, especially with where it's placed in the stage. And it's also, I think, a little bit more impressive because of how much more open the
Hmm.
Susvara sounds. So it immediately appears more detailed. Um, so I would say, generally speaking, I would pick the Susvara if I was looking at detail, um, as long as your system is capable enough of reproducing that
Right.
detail.
I want to get Metal's take on this question as well. So at some point you need to have a Susvara. But
I'm not allowed to say that Sasvara has more detail because I'm paid by Odyssey. So you know.
Right.
he's joking. He's joking.
I mean,
But
if you want one,
Oh,
well,
God.
so that's the thing, right? Like you have to be able to like compare them side by side because like in my mind, if I had to describe it one over the other, I'd say that for bass, I still think that what the LCD4 is able to do, as far as like when there's like a really busy passage or like music with a lot of complex layerings and stuff going on, the LCD4's ability for bass articulation to still come through and like be still perfectly precise is more noticeable than on the
Yeah.
Sasvara. But for just about every other part of the frequency range, in my mind, the Sasvara, at least it's more, things jump out at me a little bit more on the Sasvara, and I think that does have to do more with stage elements and precision, kind of like, like to me, the Sasvara is a much more, let's say, classically normal tonality than the LCD4 is more of like, well, I have to think backwards here. So there's like, it's like not actually Harman bass, like it's below the Harman shelf for the bass. So the bass on the LCD4 isn't elevated. That's actually something that I think a lot of people don't, when they think LCD4, they think, oh, Odyssey bass, it must have a lot of bass, but it's actually less than the Harman shelf. So, but as far as like textural quality and like detail in the bass, it's so good there. Like it's the kind of thing that kind of, it just redefines what's possible for a given frequency range. And in my mind, you know, Odyssey is great at doing that in the bass, and LCD4 demonstrates that. And for the rest of the frequency, well, it's the treble and mid-range, well, more treble than anything else, I find that on the Sasvara, it does that kind of quality as well. Even though it's very obvious that with the LCD4, the treble detail there is exceptional too. I just think that it's only held back a little bit by the, let's say, upper mid-range, lower treble. I don't know where that starts, but the recession there, it makes it so that it's not quite as noticeable how resolving it can be. But again, because of unit variation, I don't know how yours might measure or sound, right? So
I mean, Metal heard mine, so
yeah.
It's.
Oh, was that the one you reviewed?
yeah.
Yeah, it's also the one I
Well,
reviewed,
okay,
yeah.
it's
well,
one
the second one I reviewed. Yeah.
Right.
The one that is the official video is a unit that was sent to him by Odyssey.
Yeah,
And
that one
then in
definitely
the
had more air than
Right.
almost any of the other ones I think I tried.
right,
So I don't know what it was.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
And then when did I compare with yours? I'm trying to remember. Oh, that was the
Empyrean.
Empyrean. That's what it was. Yeah, that was not even close, hilariously. But
yeah.
I just mean
So
between those two
here's
headphones.
here's
but-
the weird thing is that then when I compared the Empyrean to other things at Can Jam, I was very surprised at how the treble, especially it seemed around like the sibilance range. Like
Mhm.
I'm gonna ballpark and say anywhere from like 6.5 to 10K.
Mhm.
It was like really peaky and grating.
Hmm.
on
Interesting.
the Empyrean.
On
Wait,
the
which pads
Empyrean.
did it have?
It had leather
Oh,
or
okay.
Really?
whatever their like
Okay.
protein leather whatever.
Because I thought the treble was the best part of the Empyrean. Like the treble detail, I thought was like maybe
Oh,
not
geez.
6 to 10K, but like above that, like the let's
Oh,
say
the air?
Yeah,
I
the
thought
air quality.
was slightly muted. I mean, well, then again, the LCD4's
Yeah.
air is kind of like...
That's the
Yeah,
thing.
compared to
That's
the
thing, is,
LCD4,
like,
it's not.
when I was trying both, like it was to the point where I then like switched and I gave a sales pitch to the gentleman that was operating the amp at the Cayenne booth.
Hmm.
And I was like, here, let me try something that's more familiar. And I grabbed my 580 and I was like, internally, I thought, oh my gosh, like, how do I tell him that the 580 sounds better than the Empyrean on this amp? Like, how do I do it?
It's because
And
it was signed
then-
by Axel Grell. Oh no, that was Max's.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, no, mine is too.
See, that's where you get sound quality. It's
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, I actually
No,
But see,
the
like-
Empyrean's a really interesting
interesting.
headphone
Yeah.
because like I hate that adjective. That doesn't mean anything, but it's like I can see why people really love the thing because it's very relaxed. Yeah, there's
There
the
you go.
signature for you.
there's a signature.
nice.
That won't sell for less than $1,000. But anyway, Yeah, the Empyrean also doesn't weigh anything like the LCD4.
Right,
That's
that's
one of
the
the big
thing.
things that people.
So, but I
are
wonder
asking for.
if they did like go for something that was like spare no expense and spare no weight cost, right?
Well, they
Would
clearly
they be able
spared
to?
no expense with the build quality.
That's
Like,
true.
Right.
I think that's probably the best built
Yeah.
headphone I've ever seen. Now that and even after, I can't think of a better built headphone off the top of my
Yeah.
head anyway. And that's also not incredibly heavy at the same time.
Right, because
So,
I was just about to say, like, technically, I would say Abyss's stuff
oh yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
fits
technically the
that
highest.
bill, but for everybody, like, one of the compliments to the Empyrean is that, hey, it's really comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas certain people can find Abyss very comfy, and other people just
Yeah, the
Absolutely
1266 is a weird. It's just a weird fit, and you have to play with it for a while. That's, I don't know. Even if I were to own one of those, like I'd have to put it on and then play with it for like 5 minutes before every time I used it. Like,
Every
I feel
time,
like
yeah.
that would be.
See,
Really
and
odd.
that was my fear too, but like
Yeah.
it took me like 30 seconds to find what I thought was like the best
Okay.
fit. And then once like over time, and especially over the time of ownership, I could definitely see where somebody's just like boom boom good.
Right. You have to figure out. You have to
Yeah.
be able to know exactly where the adjustment is just by looking at it. That would
Which
be
I mean,
ideal for
in
your.
the same way, like
Yeah.
we've all had headphones, and I even recall a couple people at Can Jam like taking quite a while to find like the good fit
Mm-hmm.
of the
With
driver
any
relative
headphone.
to the ear.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a good question for you, Metal. How is the Auteur compared to the LCD3? Or
Yeah,
sorry, the
just-
Auteur.
I just saw that. Is it Otor? I don't even know what in the world it is. And then there's me pronouncing Aeolus wrong every time. Stupid
Oh
review.
boy.
Apparently that was like the original Greek way to pronounce it. I don't even know. But anyway, yeah, I think it's Otor. But the LCD3. So, the LCD3 is actually probably the brightest Odyssey. Now that I've heard all of them back to back again recently. I used to think the LCDX had the most trouble. The LCD3, I think does now. Obviously, there's still some variation, but the LCD3 has distinct advantages over the LCD2 in resolution. Still, I think it's probably on par with a good LCDX. But the Auteur, again, this is like apples and oranges with this thing. But you're not going to get the resolution of the LCD3. First of all, in the Auteur, I don't
Yeah, it's
think
a
those are
biodynamic.
really comparable.
Yeah.
And mainly because it's dynamic, also. But if you like the Auteur is probably one of the closest, probably next to the Alex, and the Clear a little bit less so, as an absolute direct upgrade from like the HD600 and the 650, because it's got the same kind of forward upper mids that the Aeolus doesn't have, and it's got a little more treble energy too, but it sounds very. It's just a very natural sounding headphone, but I wouldn't use it for stuff that isn't well recorded at the same time, because it can get harsh if the music is not like really well recorded. But if you want vocals to be forward, I've had this discussion with Resolve so many times, which is kind of funny. Like,
Yeah.
you listen to really well recorded music and you want your vocals to be forward, and then you go to metal and it's like blasting you in the face with electric guitar. It's like you can't. It's not really the same signature for everything, I don't think.
Right.
And so the Auteur, I think, is better for people who listen to good quality things. Also,
I would agree.
It's also a higher resolution than the Aeolus, just to throw that in there. And it sounds way more normal and realistic than the LCD3 does. I mean, the LCD2 and 3 don't have the best frequency response, so.
What about for soundstage for those?
That's a good question.
I
it's
would
been too
say
long for
actually,
me to,
I mean, to me,
flex
I
into
would say
that.
more the I think what is actually possible could be better on the Auteur compared to the 3
Yep.
because of your ability to use tube amps to your advantage.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, I
It's
haven't
a little bit
experimented with that
easier.
at all.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier to get that going for you. Especially like, for instance, you could probably get like a pretty good tube amp and have it, work its magic with the Auteur and get a quite wide soundstage relative to what you're able to get with the LCD3. I was gonna say it's basically ditto on what Metal said with regards to the Auteur and the LCD3, because we had our opportunity to listen to both at Can Jam, and the Otour was definitely like the surprise for me because I was
On
like
the pendant.
no, actually,
Oh, okay.
On the various amps that they had there, the Otour was, oh shoot, was it Zeracote or
Yes.
Zeracote or whatever? That particular model of Otour was really, really good. Like that was one of the things I'm pretty sure I shouted out in the Can Jam video
Yeah, you
that
did.
you shot. Yeah, that was stunning. And yes, for like more normal audiophile music, it was great.
Yeah.
I can't I at the moment I can't see myself like having the desire to own an LCD3 for two reasons. One, I think in that price range, I would select my headphones maybe a little bit differently. And then also number two is that this exists.
Right.
There's also the headphone,
Yeah, there's
which
right. There's
which we
also
were
the
talking about
headphone.
earlier. I thought that was really good off of the iCan, but for some reason, I don't mean to rag on this thing, but every time I plug something into the Phonitor, it sounds broken. Max and I have had this conversation. We're like, is this true? Like, what? How is this? I don't know if it's that it's set up poorly at CanJam or what,
Are you using the single
but
limit output or the balanced output?
I don't think we were ever using the balanced outputs, and I
Because
don't know if that has anything to do with it.
to me, well, it might, because everything that I've plugged into the balanced output actually sounds really good. And when I plug it into the single-ended, I mean, it's not that it sounds bad; I just don't notice any difference, like between that and like other amps. Whereas with the balanced one, I'm like, oh, there's actually a difference here.
Yeah,
So
it's really weird. I don't know. Every time we plugged in, like the Focal booth had a lot of them last year at least, and like the first time I tried the Stellia and the Elysia ever, I was like, this is like terrible. This is like $100 headphone. And then I went back to the booth later. I don't remember what their other amps were, and I listened to it again, and I'm like, is that headphone broken or is something else wrong? And then we started experimenting, and it was like, why does the Phonitor sound so noticeable that? And I'm not talking about subtle differences here either. This is like really different, and that was very strange. That's still a mystery to me. I have no idea. I bet if I brought it home, I'm hoping it wouldn't be like that.
yeah,
If I
Yeah,
were to actually try one, but
that's the one thing that I would ideally like to try at home would be one of the Phonitors,
yeah,
just because I my inexperience with the unit leads me to believe that there is something going on at a Can Jam that is not maximizing its performance, and it is there to be a convenient tool in order for
yeah,
music to play on it. So I don't know if it's like the internal DAC that I'm hearing that's just not my cup of tea. I don't
right. Because
know
you
if
can
it's
get it as a standalone amp, or you can
right,
get it with a built-in DAC component.
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Max, you should get one of those in for review. I want to see if it can be saved because I want my VU meters. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Actually,
it
You
have
gotta.
VU meters on it? I thought
It does. Yeah, this is it right
yeah.
here. Yeah.
And it's got
Yeah.
like a bunch of crossfeed, which is actually really interesting. It's got some settings I don't see on too
Yeah,
many
I,
amps, which
I
is
haven't
pretty
played
cool.
with that too much actually yet, but
That's
Yeah.
so actually metal. Instead of getting an SPL Phonitor, you need a Lynx Hilo.
Oh no, I don't even know what that is. That means
I
it's
don't know what
probably
that. I've never
good.
heard of that.
It's what one of our friends is switching to.
Oh no, I don't know. Yeah, there's too many. There's too many amps and DACs that are obscure. That
And
you guys
eventually we
like.
won't be using any amps and DACs anyways because everything's going to be wireless.
Dude, oh my God. You know what? That leads me
Is it gonna be
into.
is it gonna be wireless like bone conduction?
Dude,
I
I got the Galaxy Buds recently. Okay, I don't really want to shift everything over to IEMs, but I do want to talk
go
about
ahead.
IEMs because I've actually been experimenting with those for some time now that I haven't said anything. Yes, Flux is a floating head, actually. But
Yeah, sorry. I
No,
have
in
a
real
shirt
life.
here.
In real life, he's a floating head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's just floating around
Technically,
Can
it's a
Jam trying on
floating helmet.
headphones.
we know.
Max was helping him with headphones, putting them on.
Ah, that's funny. But anyway, yeah, I got the Galaxy Buds, the original, recently because I was on like a refurb sale. It was like $56, and I was like, this is way too good to pass up this. So I bought one, and oh my God, I've never owned a true wireless before, and the convenience factor bit me in the face. Like I am so addicted to using this thing. like just lying down and just chilling and watching YouTube or whatever. Oh my God, the convenience factor on the Galaxy Buds is out of control. So I don't think we're gonna see headphones stop going Bluetooth and wireless. And so what my dream is that we keep improving Bluetooth to the point where it really doesn't matter anymore. And hopefully we'll get to the point where, you know, Bluetooth 6 or whatever with lossless streaming becomes a thing, and then we keep improving and that kind of thing. Oh, Android is here too to say that, yeah, Galaxy Buds are also good. The problem, the only problem I had with them is that the 5K peak on them is pretty annoying, but there's a bunch of interesting EQ settings that the app comes with, so you can play around with that. But yeah, I can't believe that was $56. What in the world, man? That
You can
they sound much better than they should.
we'll get to a point where, you know, Bluetooth is so good that
Yeah,
you can select which Bluetooth you want, whether you want the silver coated Bluetooth or the copper,
oh no.
and you'll be able to adjust your sound based on Bluetooth signal.
It was just about the
And we can charge more for that too.
it's just like the joke that, by the way, Flex, you're still muted.
Yeah.
We kept laughing about the sound quality was ruined when we were all hanging out in the hotel room in
Oh, yeah.
Can Jam
Oh my gosh.
because we had a Blue Dragon cable adapter plugged into a Silver Dragon destroyed. You
Or
gotta
just-
have Silver Dragon all the way through, man.
My favorite was at the Abyss station with the Linus stack. You see Flux there plugging in with an adapter with the dongle, plugging in his
Yeah.
own music.
That's what I was doing. You know, the OTG, if you guys haven't been to a headphone meet like Can Jam, by the way, if anybody in the chat, you need to bring an OTG adapter with you. It's like the most useful thing you can
Yeah,
possibly bring.
Okay, thank you so much, the guys at IFI, because like I
Yeah.
didn't have a dongle at all, so it was just me on at the end of day one being like, yeah, like oh no, I've just been kind of listening to whatever tech demos everybody else has got, and then the guys at IFI were like, after I was trying the headphone, I was really enjoying it. They're like, yeah, like here's one, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the possibilities, they're endless now. So yeah, that's when like day two was really me just like flexing my muscles of like, okay, I know what everything sounds like now that I know what everything sounds like now with what their demo music is and using Rune or whatever
Right.
test tracks. I was like, okay, like I'm really sorry everybody for disconnecting your setups, but I want to know what my music sounds like. I want to know.
Most of them really didn't mind. I think about
Right. I
doing
felt
anyway.
really bad at the Abyss booth, but also like their
Guys are staring you down.
tablets. Yeah. Well, yeah. But yeah, their title like stopped working for probably about a half hour, and I was like, well, I have music. I don't have a whole lot, but I have music, and I'll just use mine. So yeah,
it
that was the main thing, is that being able to
definitely
use like
convenient.
my own tracks, things that are extremely familiar, regardless of the quality of the like method of like transporting the signal. To be able to have something that is consistent across each booth was like a lifesaver in my opinion.
I won't review anything unless I can use, you know, the stuff that I was familiar with. But okay, the chat is going crazy about IEM still. So one thing that I was just reminded by Android here is, or somebody, the codec. There's only one. The one problem with the Galaxy Buds is if you don't have a Samsung phone with the Samsung codec. Like the only reason why I'm like shilling it here is really good is because I can tell that the resolution is good enough that the codecs are really holding it back. And like if you don't have a Samsung phone, then you have to use SBC or AAC. And actually, I thought AAC sounded much worse. Sounded like a 96K MP3. Not even kidding. On my OnePlus, 'cause I'm a OnePlus, than the SBC codec.
Hey,
so that's what I
OnePlus
stuck
Bros.
with. Yes, well, I have a 16, still with the original case. I need the 8 when that comes out. But anyway, yeah, we should do a phone stream. No, I'm kidding.
I can't find mine, so
But
I tried.
Find your
Yeah, I was
OnePlus?
gonna try and like text out like the new stream link to
Oh.
friends and family.
Oh, wow.
Like, and I couldn't find it, so I was like, "Hey, Jess, can you help out? You have a phone with you, right?" Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
The Galaxy Buds are good though, but apparently I haven't heard the Plus, but Harman for IEMs is very controversial. It looks like in the audiophile
Yeah.
community, which I kind of agree with too, which is pretty interesting. They have a really large boost. I think it's like I want to say like 8 dB or something like that. It's really quite a large shelf compared to the over-ear target, and the upper mids are also quite forward. So that's not a
Yeah.
great sound for me. And so beyond the true wireless stuff, because I think we covered that, and that stuff is, I mean, it's just so convenient. So I can't wait to see that continue to improve. And by the way, the AirPods Pro are amazing, actually. They're really good, true wireless. I can't believe I'm saying that because I'm like the most anti-Apple person anyone's ever seen in their life. But I can't deny that the sound quality out of that thing is like
Well, you still hear
incredible.
the treble burble for the noise canceling though. Like that's when that's
Oh,
on, you
oh,
absolutely
yeah, no.
hear that digital.
Oh, okay. I think most of my listening when I think it was it Max? I can't remember who showed me it. Maybe it was DMS. I think I had the noise canceling off for the whole thing. But
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
are
with noise canceling
really-
off, it's fine. Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
glad.
yeah.
that
Wasn't it DMS in the hotel room?
I think it was DMS. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's who showed me it. But dude, oh my God, those
Yeah,
things.
it's great.
They have great resolution, and the bass is not super over boosted like
Yeah,
the
it's
Harman
like just
target.
nice and linear and extends well.
Yes, exactly. So those things are really serious, and but I still think there should be some shelf, but that's just personal. But anyway, getting on to what I was gonna say. I know we're approaching 2 hours, so I'm trying to make this kind of short. Of the stuff that I've heard so far, the T2 and the T4 are actually really nice IEMs for me. Now, the T2, some people think is really bright. I think I like it a little bit better with foams. That's what I'm using right now. I don't use any EQ on it at all. I just got the T4 in today, it's a couple hours ago, and I think it's a nice upgrade over the T2. However, 5K is kind of annoying, and I had to EQ 5K down by like 4 or 5 dB, so that was a little bit of a letdown. But other than that, I think those are really, really good too. The bass is just a little strong on them. And it's funny to say that because things like the Blonde BL03 that people are talking about and the Sonys, the MH755s have like 10, 15, 20 dB bass boosts on them, which I think are just like, oh, that's out in left field for me. Like, I don't want that much bass, and a lot of IEMs have that. But anyway, that's my really short rant on IEMs so far.
But it's interesting because even with, so like as much as you can't use a midi DSP ears rig for measuring
definitely
IEMs,
not.
like, it
That's
doesn't
really
have
inaccurate.
it's just like a hole directly to a microphone. There's no, so as much as you can't do that, they do devise a target for it, and it's the diffuse field target. So like I imagine.
Oh, you tried that? Oh no.
I tried it. I was like, yeah, but you end up getting really weird results as well.
Yeah, I know. It's gonna vary. The problem is it's gonna vary from one to the next.
Or how far in you push.
And depending on
impossible.
insertion depth specifically.
Yeah,
which is wrong because the acoustic impedance is not right.
Yeah, I'm gonna get one of those couplers like what Android has.
Kryn has.
Yeah.
Kryn also has one. I believe Kryn is using a Chinese IEC compliant-ish coupler. From what I've heard from talking to Mad Economist, apparently the official IEC couplers are very, very expensive. But if you buy one of the quote-unquote knockoff ones or whatever, you're actually like very close. You're like 90% of the way there. There's a little bit of variation between one to the next, but it's much, much better, obviously, than an ears or something. So you could even go that route. So
yeah,
but that'd be fun.
But it's interesting that you mentioned the Harman like controversy or about Harman tuned IEMs.
Yeah, it's unusually controversial for IEMs, I think, versus headphones, especially.
Well, and I wouldn't have expected that. Because I listened to The Blessing too for Moondrop, and almost all Moondrop IEMs are Harman-ish, as far as I understand. And I loved it. I thought the Moondrop was fantastic. And then when the guy who was there with me, he was like, "Yeah, they're Harman tuned." I was like, "What?" Like the. So like there's the controversy, but then at the same time, it's like, I mean, it's show impressions, of course. So I don't know. Actually, I'd have to like sit down and listen to them and review them properly.
Yeah, somebody else just said the Moondrop Starfields. That's like the #1 next IEM on my list to try.
And the S8.
I think the really high end stuff. Yeah, definitely, I want to try that. But So the Harman. So I think that it's possible that even though the Galaxy Buds Plus are supposed to be Harman tuned, and most people seem to be finding them, at least reviewers, shouty and too bassy. If you look at the measurements, I think the Moondrops are less harsh and less bassy on. Yeah, less. I think Android just said that. They're both less of the things that we don't like about the Harman targets. So I guess you can say they're Harman-ish, which is probably why we're liking them so far.
Right.
I
Harman
haven't
in
tried the
principle.
blonde BL03. A lot of people are talking about that. But I don't know. I already have the Sonys, and I think they're awesome for $10. But yeah, that's a lot of bass, and they are a little bit harsh, but not like crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
But
my
they're so
my-
good for $10. What in the world?
yeah, they are. I mean, they remind me of like, you know, a better version of what I had been using for many years at at work.
Yeah.
The
Oh, the
skull
Galaxy Buds?
candies. No, the skull candy.
okay.
Oh, skull candy. Yeah. Oh my god, I actually took out my skull candy. I actually have. I still have a collection of stuff I used to use from years and years ago. Oh my god, which skull candy was it? Which one did you have? The Jib Flux?
Yeah, the
or-
jib.
Okay. I cannot remember the name of mine. It was like a $30 model. It's like slightly up model though.
So the inked.
No, the one above that. This is the one
Oh.
I had an inked, and then I had the one above that too. But like, I went back to listen to those again, and I was like, oh my god, there's no detail. It's so dark. It's so bassy. The other thing that sells so much on Amazon, I think, is those Panasonics. What is that? The HJE 120K or whatever. Almost everyone seems to have one of those, and I even have one of those, and that has a crap load of bass too. It's pretty funny. So I don't know.
I mean,
I
it
don't
is
know
also
anymore.
interesting that like people's impressions of IEMs are so drastically different. I feel like there's still so much variance there, whereas like there's a bit more commonalities as far as impressions go for over-ear headphones. Like,
You know, this is really I don't know if that's even true either, because like people are like, oh my god, the regular T2 are blowing my ears out in trouble, and I'm like, what? And then those same people are like, oh, T2, oh, that's like way brighter than a biodynamic, and then I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like,
well, so
I
but that's
really
what I
don't
mean.
know.
Like to me, it's like there's like
I think
you've said
people
that.
vary. I think people vary on both, honestly, at this point. I really don't know
Mm.
which one is more. You know, if anything, like setting aside subjective impressions, if anything, I would expect that people removing more anatomy
Right,
from it
yeah.
by using an IEM would be more consistent. But even that doesn't, yeah, like you said, that doesn't seem to be the
The
case
reason
either.
why I think that is because of you're only dealing with one variable, or well, you're dealing with eardrum, but you're also dealing with like
Less-
it's
well, less
only canal.
variables, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so if that variable is dramatic, right? Like so
Dramatically different from the average. Which is
yeah,
what the
then
couple is
suddenly
for.
that's the thing
Okay.
that determines, right? There's only one determinant, and in my mind it's like it would perfect as much as like we're supposed to be used to this, and this because this is just what we've been used to hearing for so long. If that one variable is physically interacting with the tips and that changes everything, then I think that could affect the way that people actually perceive this stuff. And I mean, just to speak to the differences that you and I have about this, like you said that the U12T is warm, and I think like what? Like to me, it's like it's bordering on bright. Like I don't know. Like
It's also I think meat impressions are really not that great.
Right,
Like the
right.
stuff I'm talking about with the 10 audio stuff is all home impressions. Galaxy Buds all home impressions. I'm not
Right.
gonna pass judgment on the U12T until I hear it somewhere
the
outside
other
of
thing is
meat.
the U12T does use linear impedance design. As far as I know, I have to double check that, but I think they have linear impedance design in there as
Oh,
well.
okay.
So that it shouldn't really change that much depending on
Oh,
the
that's
source
pretty
either.
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The most surprising IEM I heard, but again, meat impressions, was still the IER M9. That thing is just
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it sounded so much more detailed than most things
Oops.
that
I
I've
have
heard.
the Tia Forte here right now, and it's
Really, really up there. Yeah.
it is for detail, man. It's nuts.
I
You know,
couldn't.
I think that I'm on the beat. Like some people don't like the way BAs sound, and I can understand that. But like for me personally, I think Android agrees with this, but not everybody does. If you're on the BA side, you can get better resolution, I think, ultimately,
Yeah.
than the dynamics, but the dynamics have better dynamics themselves, like
Yeah.
slam or whatever quality.
Yeah.
They try to have a little bit of detail. So I mean, it's I think it's more preference there.
But it's almost
So that's why I
similar
like
to
the
like
M9.
to planar versus dynamic as well for over ears, right? Almost
That's
similar.
kind of yeah. I think that's a good
Yeah.
analogy actually to draw. Yeah.
To me, I can't get over the Knowles BA timbre, like the ones that where they stuff like a million drivers into the, and it's like,
Oh, no.
holy
I
crap,
agree.
this is like smearing, and like it would be detailed if the timbre wasn't completely messed. Like it actually like affects the treble detail like horribly on some some Knowles BA IMs, not all of them obviously, but some of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I mean, we've been going for about 2 hours now. I
Yeah.
want to open it up quickly to like a few minutes of questions for these guys. So if anybody in the chat,
I'm still good for another like 25 minutes or so.
Okay.
If we,
Yeah,
if,
we'll
if we
open
were to
it
go
up.
that far,
Let's say
so.
25 minutes. I got like another like 3.5 hours.
okay, well, I definitely don't, but
Okay, well, I'm
we'll open it
sorry.
up to 3.5 hours. Man, what were you expecting?
Nothing.
All day stream.
All day. Yeah,
I was expecting nothing after
we're
this.
isolated anyways, right? We got to observe social distancing, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing the world a favor. People are like, yeah, you gotta change your habits and make sure you keep good social distancing habits. And I'm like, so no change for me, right?
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Or-
like, we're all experts. at that.
You were
What are
expecting
you
me to go
talking about?
outside? What?
Yeah. The main thing that I've had to change with regards to the virus is just having some way to disinfect my hands or whatever when
Just wash your hands way
I'm
more
going
often.
from one
Yeah.
place to a next.
Well, especially if
Then
you're doing
switch-
loner tours, man.
Yeah, exactly. Or including like some kind of alcohol swab in
Yeah.
the box.
I
Yeah.
actually have this. Oh, I can't see it right now.
I think
Hold on.
Coney gave me some wipes for headphones or
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. Yeah,
So
maybe
these
they
are
gave
all-
me that too.
These are all my
Coney
medical
pad
grade.
wipes.
Or that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like, "This is great for loners and stuff," and I'm like, "Actually, you know what? That actually would be pretty helpful."
Yeah, I'm debating about like sending that along with headphone
Everything you
since
send around.
yeah, since the headphone tour is supposed to be like so like it's supposed to hit so many households.
Right. But in theory we don't know how transferable that stuff is if it like
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's mainly just it's mainly like specifically with headphone, it's just to make sure that like
yeah.
from one person to the next just use one of the cleaning wipes.
I'd be more worried about IEMs than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why now I have enough tips to where like I probably should be. I probably will be okay with
Yeah.
other people's.
Well, Dakota
items
gave me a
coming in.
bunch as well, so I'm
Yeah,
happy
that's
about
pretty
that.
helpful. So anyway, yeah, as you said Q&A. So I think the question that someone
This
keeps asking here.
I4 Odyssey.
Yeah, is the i4 good? I've heard it briefly. I don't think I've ever heard it in a quiet environment yet. So take this with a grain of salt. But I also I might be slightly biased because I know that it's using the LCD4's film, not as large obviously of a driver, but it's using the same film, and it is incredibly high resolution. But just like the iSign stuff, it needs to have an EQ built in. So if you're using it, you have to use it with a cipher cable, or you have to run Reveal, or make your own EQ profile or something. Because listening to it without the correction is just way off. I don't think it's nearly as way off as the iSigns, at least according to the Odyssey guys again. And I haven't had it at home to come up with my own profile, but that's all I know about it. I don't know if you guys have heard it or not, but
Yeah, I got to check it out at CanJam, and based on that experience, it was a lot better than what I was expecting, and I would, if the weight of an LCD4 or the regular Odyssey LCDs is an issue, you should definitely give it some consideration.
Really?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty good. Actually,
That's
wait a minute,
interesting.
didn't you?
No, I did the
Didn't
i3,
you-
which
okay.
was impressive for its technicalities, but again, it's like the frequency
Oh,
response was
Yeah, you have
odd.
to
Yeah,
have to listen to it with the cable.
Yeah,
Same thing with the
unfortunately,
i4, but
yeah.
I heard the i3 in a quiet environment also, and yeah, the i4 is also like way more detailed than that. So
Really?
it's
Wow.
very interesting. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty serious. You know, for $2,500 competing against
Yeah.
other $2,500 IEMs, it's very interesting.
I'm excited about planar tech and IEMs. It's just so far it feels like it hasn't been totally figured out.
Apparently, there was no way for them to have tuned the thing
No,
any
yeah.
differently, so they optimized the THD instead, something like that. I think that's what Tile said,
Which makes sense.
which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but people, I wish it was. I wish it was more publicly known that like a lot of people are plugging them in and being like directly into amps and they're like, this is awesome, and I'm like, what?
Confirmation
the
bias,
frequency
man.
response is like horrible. Doesn't it have like a huge 1.5K peak or something like that? I think it is that they compensate for. I forget what the natural FR looks
But
like.
the i3 without the cipher was pretty
Do you
strange.
know? Can you describe that? I don't remember. Like,
So it was a treble monstrosity, like the treble. Sorry, this side up, but with the cipher cable, it like everything was more balanced out. It still wasn't like I still wanted to like tinker a little bit.
yeah,
Of course, who knows how it actually measures? I'm just describing like what it sounded
Right.
like to me. It was, but the thing is like with and without the DSP. You could definitely tell that there was something promising about planar tech and IEMs. Like as far as like comparing it to other IEMs, you could tell that like there's more like I like planar tech better than BA tech. I think like it just sounds tighter, punchier. Like to me, it sounds more visceral, more engaging. Like it sounds like a planar, and
like there's resolution, but you're not trading off the dynamics as much. Yeah, that's getting it all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the i4 is definitely something you should review then, because I'm pretty sure it's got a lot more resolution. I don't know if we line up on this, but the i3, for me, with the cable, I mean, most of the frequency response sounded fine, except that still the upper mids are still kind of too recessed. But other than that,
with the cable, upper
it
mids were
wasn't bad.
recessed. Yeah,
even with the cable, fixing the
yeah.
other problems, I think it needs a little bit more upper mids, and then it's pretty good buy actually.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Okay, let's see. Next question. Oh, somebody asked for tube amps that a recommendation for a tube amp that isn't a pendant. So
IHA1, Dragon Inspire IHA1.
Interesting. I haven't heard that one actually. I was
Tube
gonna say
Roller's Delight.
Yeah, everyone
okay.
seems to have that if you're rolling tubes. Yeah.
I was gonna say if you can get one, the Glen OTL. It depends on the headphones that you have, obviously, but like the Glen OTL is very celebrated, and obviously I haven't heard it, but they did have it at the ZMF booth at CanJam.
Yeah, that was a very well equipped tube amp.
Yeah. And so like my take on the tube amp thing is like, make sure you know if it's gonna be the kind of like tube GUI thing or if it's gonna be the more neutral kind of thing, because that'll like if you make sure you know what you want out of a tube amp, because the range is pretty huge for what you can actually get.
Correct.
And I'd also,
especially if it's something where the tubes themselves, if in order to get that particular quality out of the amp, if you are if like for instance with the IHA1 in particular, like if you have to pair it with a particular rectifier or type of rectifier and then also have specific driver tubes to use a particular style, because certain ones you can tune it quite a bit. You can have something that is very warm and euphoric, but then you can also have something that is a little bit cleaner.
My one recommendation would be to skip the ones that are like the like entry level, like the ones that are tube hybrids, or there's a bunch of stuff out there where it's
Cavalli
like
tube hybrid,
tube amp, and then I don't know, like I feel like you're not actually getting a tube amp. You're getting
I apologize, but skip everything that's on mass drop. Skip every tube amp that's on mass drop.
Oh, they're not going to be happy with that.
Yeah, but what about that like $25 one on Amazon?
I know. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like you can find stuff where it's like tube amp, but it's like there's some where it's like somebody was taking them apart and they're like, is the tube even hooked up to anything that would deliver sound? It's just a tube that's
Oh,
got power,
yeah,
and
that's right.
it's really
Yeah,
just a
it's, like,
solid state
glowing.
amplifier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
funny.
So like there's some stuff out there with tube amps where it's like, no, like it's not worth taking seriously. I know Espav loves the Cavalli Tube Hybrid. I had that one for a
Really?
day.
Wow, that's
I
interesting.
actually had it for a day, and it physically blew up in front of me. And that's not a knock against it. I didn't have a chance to properly listen to it,
That's
but I watched
awesome.
it blow up. Like I watched the tube shatter, which and then it started
Oh
smelling
my
like burnt
god! It
electronics.
literally just burst.
Yeah. Like, well, here's my suspicion. It's I don't know if this is like what happened there, but I think the tube was damaged in shipping somehow.
That makes
In
sense.
shipment,
I
yeah.
plugged it in, and then then that's when it started to be like getting worse, right? And then
Okay.
this completely fucked the amplifier.
Oh,
I was
bleep.
wondering. I was
bleep.
wondering what that sounded like. And
Yeah, no, it was it just stopped. It was like,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, for more budget tube options, I guess it depends on what you're looking for. I know, like, as far as value goes, there's like you can probably DIY some bottle head designs. Those can be pretty cheap. And we're talking outside of the crack.
like there's the speedball and the
Well,
this crack
outside of
with
the crack.
Speedball, but the other
so
ones,
the
yeah.
single-ended experimenters kit. There's also, if you want to, okay, so the one that I will actually include from Massdrop is, it's not really a Massdrop tube amp, but it's a Laconic Labs Night Blues Mini. It's rebranded Massdrop and the Eddy Current collaboration, the ZDT Junior.
Yeah.
That is pretty good as far as like when you're on a more strict budget. But generally speaking, I would say like you have to spend a little bit more, because for me personally, the under $1,000 designs just don't seem to have it for me in terms of getting the timbre correct, getting the actually not just timbre, but also like just being safe to use outside of a very particular situation where everything is ideal. Like, I know people, this isn't a knock on the company, but rather more of the user experience, is that there are a couple people that have mentioned to me that like their tube amplifier destroyed their headphones, and it was and it was because of user error. But they didn't think
I know what you're
that.
talking about.
Yeah. Particularly with a few cheaper designs, that the protections aren't in place, and people operate it in a particular way where things can blow up, which I would just recommend just following like correct powering on and off processes of your signal chain, making sure that you're not like, if the amplifier manufacturer says please don't power on the amp with headphones plugged in, well then follow that. But some other amplifier manufacturers say do power it on with headphones plugged in, because then the amplifier knows what kind of load it should expect.
Or save the tubes for a guitar amplifier.
Yeah, exactly. Save the tubes for a guitar amp.
The only tube amps I own are Mesa.
Get
Boogie.
a nice orange. Get a nice
Or
orange amp.
Marshall JCM 800s. Anyway,
But see the Martin. Hey Martin, how's it going? He mentions that the Cayenne. There's a Cayenne tube amp that's actually not bad under 700.
HA-1A.
Yeah, I haven't. Tyler.
There's also the Monoprice knockoff version of it too.
Oh, is there one? I didn't know that. Interesting. Does it also look like a pirate ship?
Yes.
They're not.
Yeah, I mean
that
one is pretty good, and in the same way, there's also there's the liquid platinum as well from Monoprice, but that is another Cavalli design that it seems like every unit is a crapshoot, and I don't know if I can like confidently recommend that, because I have heard like pretty good experiences from the community, but I've also heard other people say like it'll just die. So
I don't know. I haven't heard that the Cayenne one that Martin's mentioning, but
right.
well, I heard it a long time ago, but for like 30 seconds. But from what I've experienced of their solid state stuff, like it's pretty good, and people seem to say that that one's also pretty good. I was gonna say like don't bother getting into tubes unless it's over $1,000, but like I think there probably are a few like that are worth getting into. The only reason that I say that, I said it with caution because I think there's probably exceptions to that, but from my experience, the solid state stuff that's not too expensive gets you a long way. And
I would agree.
And when you get into the higher end stuff, like say you're spending $2,000 on an amp or something, or 100 or 1.5K on an amp, then the options for solid state and tube, they start to, the differences seem to be much more noticeable and more important for a system that you might be building. So that's why I don't know, especially when hearing the Pendant and the Verite, like to me it was like, well, that's now something new and worth exploring and getting into. And all of my other experiences of tube amplifiers have been the sub $1,000 category, and they haven't generally been anywhere near as interesting. So that's just been my experience. Like maybe there's exceptions. I don't know. I'm sure you guys could think of some if you've had more experience with them.
Bottlehead Crack seems like
yeah,
a fun
Bottlehead Crack
project.
might be.
Yeah. But
I
that's
guess
a project,
Bottlehead Crack, if you are knowledgeable enough to build one and fix some of the design issues with it, maybe. But I would honestly look at something more like the single-ended experimenter's kit if you're looking at something that like actually sounds more like the price of the kit that you're buying.
Yeah.
It gets to a higher ceiling to me than the Crack.
Yeah.
But I feel like my experience with the like some of the Woo audio tubes, the tube amps, those tend to hit a performance ceiling that isn't all that desirable to me. So the first one that really seemed up to par was the WA-22, and then the 33 was all right as well, which I realize that's like me saying, well, it's all right. I mean, again, this is at a meet. It was okay. If I would have one in home, I might have other thoughts, but at the moment, like I personally have more faith in something like the IHA one that is a little bit more the Dragon Inspire.
How much is that one?
It depends on the options that you want.
Right.
The big difference is that at 1600, it is in its base version, and I think if you upgrade it to 1950, you get the Lundal transformers, which are highly, highly, highly recommended that you get the Lundal transformers. So either look for it on the used market with the Lundal transformers, or expect to pay a bit of a premium. And I would that is the one that like really kind of sets the standard for me for a tube amplifier for headphones, where it's not like a tube pre, or it's not a
right
a hybrid design, and one that is available right now, as opposed to some more classic designs that you are only seeing them on the used market because they are like 5 years removed from the market.
Right. I want to get more into the Oris stuff, and like some of the
the Oris Nirvana.
Well, so there's the Nirvana, and then there's the Euterp, and I think they yeah. Well, there's a bunch of them that I don't know, like it looks interesting to me. I tried the Oris HA2. I was whelmed, but I tried it with the Sennheiser HD 800. That was like a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's like, but that one was winning a whole bunch of awards at the time. So I was like, I want to try it and see how it goes with the HD100 or HD100S. And I was whelmed. I wasn't like, oh my god. But
Oh, yeah,
I
this one.
bet.
I heard that Uterp at
Oh,
Can
did you?
Jam.
Because
Yeah.
I was gonna say I heard the Uterp with the HE1000 SE, and that was the first time that I was like, wow, I wouldn't EQ this. I was like, whoa, this is actually, because I mean I like the HE1000 SE for like the
Really?
technicalities
Changed it
and
that
stuff.
much? Jeez.
But I was impressed. I was like, this is something that I wouldn't, because like I would take the treble, the upper treble, like 12K down a little bit on the HE1000 SE, make it more and like a little bit more focused. Because I found it to be just like kind of like the LCD4. It reminded me of that a little bit. And with the Uterp, I was like, you know what? I wouldn't change it. So yeah, I'm interested in that stuff. I find, because it's also, as far as I understand, I don't know if it's actually fully released or what the story is there yet, but I think that's going to be something to watch out for. I would also love to try the Felix stuff, the Euphoria and the Elise and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I just haven't had a chance to try enough of them.
So I guess the one that I remember hearing at wow, okay, that would make sense. So the Aorus Hedonia, it's a 2A3 amp.
Sorry,
Right
yes,
here.
the Uterp with the Donald Dack.
Oh,
continue.
okay. So yeah, I guess I'll post it in our little message here. Oops, that's not correct.
I won't be able to see it. So
Oh, well,
full
that's
screen
fine. You can
anyways.
see it after the fact.
Yeah.
So it's the Aorus Hedonia 2A3, and in the first little bit, it says it's a headphone amplifier specially designed with the Susvara in mind. And I
Yeah.
remember hearing it there, and while it was unfamiliar music, I was still like, this is pretty good. But
Well,
yeah.
just seeing the other stuff that they've developed since the HA2 SE.
Yeah.
To me, that's one that I don't know. I'm interested in that one. And just some of the other stuff that they're doing. I was browsing their website there and I was like, whoa, there's a ton of stuff here that looks really interesting.
Yeah.
But the other stuff for tubes that I've noticed is there's a lot of people like the Glen OTL stuff, who are making stuff like the Glen OTL stuff. But the other one that I keep hearing in concert with that name is the Donald North amps. And I haven't heard any of them, but they're
Adams
also, yeah.
There's one that's a popular one that I remember.
Yeah, and the other Amps and Sound ones as well, but they're supposedly a little bit more on the like what you think of for a tube amp, like more that kind of like euphonic qualities and stuff like that.
There's also technically Deckware as well. I know that
Right.
was a favorite of Zach a long time ago.
Before the Amps and Sound stuff, and they're still
Correct.
doing really cool stuff. Yeah.
I think we should cover, just as a last thing as well, the Borealis stuff, because I know that not many people know about that, and I know I think Flux has one. Yeah, I think a lot of people in the chat are definitely going to want that.
I have a question about that one. Does it still have the seatbelt?
Yes.
That's my favorite part.
I know I'm not in like bright lighting,
No,
here,
that's-
but that
yeah.
is a seatbelt.
Doesn't come across, yeah, but
Well, send it over to me, and I'll do some B-roll of it. Get nice,
nice
Yeah.
seatbelt macro.
Make
shot.
sure
4K seatbelts.
make sure when I send it over that you can get like make sure you can get like a Mercedes-Benz seatbelt and
right, branded seatbelt on the.
yeah, it's a new level of customization. But yeah, so
Most people probably don't even know what that is, so you should explain
Right.
what it is and then what do you think.
yeah, so the Borealis is a headphone that is available at aurorasaudio.com, and it's an open back design that to me, at least from my outside perspective, since Amar is not here to comment, or I guess Ruck is the more
It's the Ruck
appropriate
phone.
name. Yeah, Ruck phone.
Yeah.
So it's a design based on the Kennerton Valley driver, and it's I am sure between him and Udis, it's been a long process not only trying to design it, but also to be able to like get the idea to go from just like something in their personal space to then be able to sell it like on a website and have it get sent out to more than just, friends and family. So with that in mind, I will say I'm a little bit partial to something that's like
It's
a
a
little bit
first
more on the side
product
of
from a
DIY and
company
like
that literally just came together. Yeah.
right, right. However, that being said, like going up against the Utopia, going up against HD 800, HE6, ZMF, like basically everything I have here. One of the things that immediately strikes me as being the selling point is that it's getting detail correct in that ballpark, or sorry, getting timbre correct in that price tag area of say $1,000 to $2,000. Getting that level of detail in that price range, but then also having the timbre be like correct and more natural in the same way that so many people have enjoyed the Sennheiser HD 580, 600, 650 kind of series of headphones. It is more, to my ears, a true successor to that, but having more in terms of dynamics, a little bit hotter treble, and it's not so laid back, so it's a little bit elevated. And I would say it's probably, I'm gonna say around like 7 to 10K is probably a little bit more elevated than what people are used to on the 580 and sister headphones. And I mean, it's extremely efficient, and it stages like something that is more reminiscent of how you would hear it with a decent set of speakers, where you can like pick it. Oh man,
It's
it's
not in
like
your
hearing
head like a
things.
580. That's
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
you're
Yeah.
you're kind of like hearing things in a three-dimensional space that has that kind of layering to it, similar to how I was hearing it on the Chord DACs, but obviously there was no Chord DAC there. And I don't mean the negative parts about like the layers and like hearing the two-dimensional spaces. I mean more so that like you can hear you can have a vocalist be up close, and you can have the sound seem far away, but
Just putting
it's
it on the
more
screen here.
coherent in terms of hearing the whole body of music from closest to furthest away, and not have it be so like discombobulated. It feels more fluid and more natural compared to the HD 800, where it can seem a bit too diffuse, a bit too far away, or it has a better, more natural timbre to it than the Utopia, which to some people might seem more like the more detailed headphone, but to me gets the metallic edge, not only to the treble but also the like most instruments just seem a bit too far from real to listen to long term on most setups. I think if you were to have a Utopia, you would have to tune the system so that it tries to offset the timbre issues. Whereas getting back to the Borealis, I feel like on the few systems I've tried it on, it's not only source transparent, but also really shines with how well it can convey natural instruments that musicians play and not suffer so hard in the sub bass department. like the HD800 or I guess it's the Sennheiser Dynamics and some of the more traditional open back dynamics from years past. It has more of that like focal bass extension, but it doesn't have that clipping issue that
Oh yeah, that's
certain
true.
focals have.
So I have a question for you about the Borealis, because I did hear it as well, and I agree that it has a similar kind of sound to, a similar kind of tonality to the Utopia. But what I would wonder about this is there an advantage either way to going with this driver, which again, it's the Kennerton Valley driver, which the company who makes it, the name escapes me. But would there be Timpani? That's right. Would there be any benefit to going with that one? Because I mean, their whole premise is let's just take an off-the-shelf driver and we'll tune it and we'll get it to sound good based on the tuning aspects for frequency response, and we won't rely on as much on like the kind of like beryllium drivers or something like that, which Focal does. But what I would wonder is what's the difference between this driver and something like a biodynamic driver? Because in my mind, something like this, the main competition here isn't necessarily the Utopia, it's more something like the Auteur, where the main selling point is timbre, not necessarily, you're not competing with, or even like nanoscale planars, right? Like you wouldn't put this up against like an LCD4 or something like that.
No, and a lot of that is due to the fact that the Borealis, to me, is because it's a dynamic driver, I judge it differently because it's mainly because of the technology. Like I don't feel it's right to compare something that's planar versus something that's dynamic. But if I had to, then the speed to me on a planar is going to be it's going to be faster than the Borealis, but I also feel like it's further from what sounds natural.
Right. It's back to that question that we were talking about earlier.
Right. So
having timbre, but also having all these other aspects. Yeah, actually, now that the thing is, released, I can say I heard a prototype of this thing a while ago. Probably like, wow, this thing has been in development for a while. It had to have been 2 or 3 years, I think. And when I heard it, the frequency response was almost perfect. There was just a little bit of 6K, 7K, like you said. There's a little bit of spice, I think, but nothing out of control. Yeah, a little bit of spice.
I like
that. Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I really like the Borealis. Right, I like that one over the closed back.
Yeah, I've never heard the closed back. I think they only had the open back when I got it on a tour, so I got to hear it at home. And so it had that, but also the dynamics, the slam on that thing was incredible. I think it was like Fostex level almost, I think, which was really unusual.
Yeah, to me it's like a good it's like a decent HE6 kind of
that actually sounds right. The only thing was at that stage in development, I didn't think the detail was really there for that price. So I think
that's my concern as well. That's what I
don't think it was nearly as like undamped and open as it is now. So I don't know.
Right. Because if you consider it now, like that's.
Yeah, I know that's not at all what it was like when I tried it. So
did you try it with the other structure for the back in the initial stage of like when the structure? I think somebody said probably, it's like a 80 X5000 mod.
Yeah,
that's what it looked like.
Maybe that's I think that's probably how it originally looked. Yeah, it's funny. Maybe that's probably when I had it. So that's why I'm not sure what it's like now. But anyway, yeah, if you want a dynamic that doesn't cost as much as an Auteur, but slams like a TH like 900 or something, and is open back and sounds like a 580, and has a much better soundstage, all of those things are Borealis, I believe.
And a seatbelt.
And a seat, but you get a free seat belt.
Safety.
How can you say no to that?
I mean, I know it kind of sounds like a sales pitch, but I mean, if I were to keep 2 headphones, and I say 2 headphones because I don't think I can ever part ways with the LCD4 at this point. Borealis is the other one.
Interesting.
Wow.
And that was kind of my thinking going into the road to the Nagra DAC.
Right.
Was going to be, what do I keep? What do I sell? And obviously, I'm going to have to sell a lot. Yeah, Borealis was going to be one of those that I kept, and everything else was just going to have to go, and just say, you know what, I had a great time for a very long time, or like great times with so many headphones, but like the one to me that gets more right and is more at the level of like what I want. Yeah, Borealis definitely checks most of those boxes. Only the I think I would only have a Sennheiser, like one of the 580s, just for sentimental
The
value.
signed one.
Yeah, the signed one. Right.
You get Axel Grell to sign a Borealis for you.
No, I'd rather have
Oh,
Ruck
no.
sign it.
Oh yeah, okay. But
Get-
see, like,
get-
so there's a couple things with this that I find interesting. One of them is that I always find that it's the people who are the enthusiasts who are super meticulous about tuning who end up producing headphones that by default just sound great. Like, disregarding what somebody's preference is for the target curve they're after, you take somebody like Zach from ZMF, or even Ryan from Modhouse. When they're tuning this stuff and they're really scrutinizing frequency response and making sure that everything is really well balanced, you end up getting something that I think is really impressive, and a lot of people are like, wow, this is so good, and as a departure from the more mass produced stuff where it just isn't as meticulously taken into consideration. And then
I think that's been the case. Just to interject really quick, I
Yeah.
think that's been the case almost across the board
Yeah.
until things like this, like H371 has come around. Like once
Sure.
the Harman research started getting integrated into products, which was definitely not the case until very recently, or at least being released, that was pretty unusual. But I agree completely. I think more reviewers
Yeah.
are likely to like headphones that come out of companies made by enthusiasts. Yeah, definitely. Like
Right,
in
'cause
general,
I feel
we're,
like-
we're scrutinizing this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I would have to commend more. I more
Yeah, Revirum is another.
commend Ruck, because I've had more experience like talking with him. He's got an ear that I have aspired to have for years now,
I've aspired
and
to have.
still has. I mean, I envy those who like can immediately pick up on frequency anomalies, because for me it happens over a longer period of time. I hear other things and latch onto them for days or weeks, and then only I'll hear something in a song, and then it then triggers, okay, well, let me sign sweep, let me hear this, let me hear that, and it's wanting to spend more time with music as opposed to just
Right.
getting like the science end of it down and just hearing the FR. And I feel like, I don't know, that's one of the things that really cautions me from reviewing, is because
Yeah.
The only caution you
I-
against reviewing, don't do it.
right.
Just-
right.
If you
So,
want to enjoy music, don't do it.
The market
Right.
is getting saturated. That's
Yeah.
the quote. That
But
movie.
see, the other thing with the Borealis that I wanted to bring up is the question of technical performance, and to me, it's actually still like a question that I debate with myself, because so if you compare, so I've owned both the Auteur from ZMF and the Verite, and to me, the Auteur sounds it's the better frequency response. At least to me, it's the more ideal frequency response. But I would still prefer the Verite over the Auteur, in spite of the fact that the Auteur has the better frequency response, and that's just because of all the technicalities that the Verite has. Disregarding whether or not it's all frequency response, like the Verite has detail that the Auteur and speed specifically, that the Auteur just doesn't have. And so what I wonder is, where does something like this fall? I just don't know enough about the Tymphany driver, or I don't know what really is possible with it, because I haven't heard the Kennerton Valley as well. But it is probably important to note that the Kennerton stuff, not just the Valley, but all of their headphones, for a time they were also fairly well regarded for having decent technical performance too.
There's not that many people who've reviewed them, I don't think.
No, there isn't. No,
Yeah,
but
they
from
weren't
what I
that
remember,
many.
like they were. I don't know how expensive the Valley was specifically, but
I
it was
think
Fisher
it's
Audio,
in the
wasn't it?
same ballpark. It's in the same ballpark as
Pricing wise,
if I remember.
Yeah. As the Borealis or as the Auteur.
As the Borealis.
Yeah.
It is 850 euros
Oh, okay.
right now.
Okay. So really, like, to me, that's the question that I think it'll be interesting to see where this falls. Whether it's something that, again, like maybe, whether it's something more like the Auteur, where its merits lie in tonality and timbre, or whether it's something like, well, I don't. Verite is maybe the wrong thing, but like maybe. So that's the question: is if it has that same quality that the Auteur has, but then is able to, have the same technical performance. And I really don't know. That's what I would hope to answer.
Yeah,
is whether or not the detail is there.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, if you can get an Auteur without the wood for the price of the Borealis, it's still $899, isn't it?
Yes.
If you can do that, that's like
Yeah.
almost a no-brainer for some people who are looking for that direct dynamic upgrade, and they don't want, a metallic timbre. But guys, you can't see that in the measurements. It doesn't exist. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But so if you don't want the Alexas or the Clears, slightly metallic treble, or even the Utopia for that matter,
Yeah, honestly, I
then
would
that's a crazy price. Yeah.
I would prefer the Borealis over the Utopia.
See, I'd go. Well, I don't know about the Borealis, but I would take the Utopia over the Auteur, because again, it's that thing of like, what is more valued, the timbre or the detail? And to me,
Yep.
I can't give up the detail after I've had it. Like, as soon
Well,
as I
then
go backwards, then I'm like,
you need a 007 resolve.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
this is coming up to.
Honestly? this is what I need.
Somebody earlier said with and without EQ, which is your favorite for like 1266 versus LCD4 versus an SR1A and a bunch of stuff in Susfara? My answer to that is probably actually 007 Mark 2.9. I don't know.
Without EQ?
Yeah, with no
Oh,
EQ.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, hands
that
down.
thing is awesome. Yeah.
With or without EQ, I would take the LCD4 on the Niagara stack.
Oh yeah, you know what? That's tough because actually my EQ for the LCD4 is, I'm sorry, your LCD4 is relatively mild, so it's pretty close to what I prefer.
So Flux's
anyway.
LCD4 is the
Oh,
unicorn.
Yeah, but I could wear the 007 actually. for
Right,
some
that's the
periods
thing,
of
is the
time.
weight of the 007 is like significantly lower.
But the problem is that now I have to buy a $20,000 Energizer, or else I'm wrong. And then
You need the Blue Hawaii.
No,
Or
no, no,
whatever
no, no,
that-
no. We're talking about like custom built stuff, or
no. Oh, yeah,
or
the
like the
Mjolnir?
Megatron,
need the
Yeah.
Mjolnir stuff. Isn't that like made to order? I don't know.
basically.
Yeah.
If you could do like with or without EQ. So that's the thing. Like right now, just listening to this as far and like trying to put it through the paces and all my test tracks so far, without EQ, since as far as my pick out of all of those, like AB1266 TC, LCD4. But that's an interesting question, right? It's like with or without EQ. So say you had the option of EQing if you wanted to. I
think they were asking the same question with EQ and without EQ, and I think
like for both.
My answers definitely change a little bit. I think.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
if,
but with
if there's
EQ,
no
though, that's the
EQ,
question.
oh boy, if there's no EQ involved,
Yeah.
and I mean, I would
K271.
probably have to say
you get a LCD4 and a neck brace.
Yeah.
That comes with it.
That's my answer.
yeah, I'd
No,
probably
actually,
take
007 is awesome still. God.
yeah. I mean, see, because I feel like I'd be like kind of cheating around the answer if it were a particular headphone, because I would just say, well, I would have, whatever headphone, and then I would use a solid state or a tube to inject some of that sound into what I'm looking for. So it's kind of hard to say like, well, absolutely no EQ, because there are kinds of things that the gear can inflect on a headphone. It might be subtle, but to me it's no different than having,
But some of it isn't
plus
subtle.
one
Like
plus one
Yeah.
minus one dB of EQ.
yeah. But say like a common bit of source gear, like say, I don't want to say 789, but like something like a 789.
Okay.
Hey guys, not to interrupt, sorry, but I gotta run. But you guys can
We
keep
should-
streaming if you want.
Well, I was about to. I think this is actually a good point to end it. So if we say, like, yeah, I'll let you just say which one would be your favorite, like no EQ. Which one?
No
would be-
EQ, and it's the only
Yeah.
headphone I have to use for the rest of the time. Is that it?
Yeah.
Me personally, I would say LCD4, but for the vast majority of people that I know it would be like more in agreement with, I would say either like you could probably go with the Susvara, or if you wanted something that was a little bit lighter, then probably the DMS Diana, because
Oh,
that
I
would be
forgot
a little
about
That's
bit
in there.
comfier.
Yeah, that's in there.
Oh, that really complicates things.
Still the Susvara for me.
Ugh,
No EQ,
DMS
this is far.
mod, DMS
No EQ,
mod versus
yeah.
LCD4 versus 007. That's the
Or
new,
007
that's
to
the
me.
new-
Yeah, 007's in there too.
That's the new ultimate review, I think, for me. It was just going to be LCD4 versus 007, but yeah, there's a new player in that realm now at $4
So you're saying when I fly out in a week that I gotta bring the 007 and the DMS Diana and the LCD4 and the
Yeah.
headphone.
Oh my god. Yeah, I guess. But you're not gonna be.
I want
flying
Metal
at
to
that
get his hands
point.
on the headphones, see what he thinks of the.
When
At
like
home.
when I heard it, even at Can Jam, when I heard it not on the Phonitor for some reason, I think it was definitely up to LCD3 in resolution. Yeah, it's quite good. But yeah, I need to have it at home for final thoughts.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. I think
All right.
I'm good.
You're copping out of the answer. No EQ. What's your go-to, Metal?
No, I think I answered it earlier. It was 007, but
Oh, okay,
honestly,
okay.
I need to have, now that Flux mentions it, I need to have the DMS mod.
Yeah.
Diana in
and,
home.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
try against that, because that's so difficult.
Yeah.
But however, price wise, 007.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Alrighty, we should probably end it there, guys. Thank you guys
Yeah.
both for so much for coming on. I know it was a little bit late notice, but we'll hopefully have to get a chance to do this again. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thanks for all of your questions. Hopefully we'll get to more of them in the next stream. And yeah, if you guys like this kind of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel. And I don't know, Metal571, are you? Should they subscribe to your YouTube channel, or should they?
No, they should unsubscribe.
Follow Metal571 on Twitter.
Yeah,
and
you'll follow me on
Flux
Twitter,
will
yeah.
eventually be on Twitter, so we'll just say it now for people.
I
who
mean,
watch
I'm
this in the
on
future.
Twitter.
Oh, he is
I don't
on
have a
Twitter.
lot
Yeah.
of content
Yeah, but let's just say follow Flux on Twitter as well.
on
So
Discord.
I'll put the links in the description.
Flux
so you guys
from
can see it.
Discord.
Yeah,
Flux on
Flux from
Twitter.
Discord.
And Metal's the YouTube sensation. So
Right.
Right. That's
Yeah.
right.
alrighty, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys
All right,
later.
Thanks for hosting. Take care.
Bye.